Hey all, Scott here. I've realized today's youth is way into getting corrupted, so it's only fair to give every possible good or service an age-appropriate rating. Introducing the Food Eating and Ratings Association, or FEAR for short, where we give all food on the market a rating so you can decide if it's right for you and your kids. E for edible, R for ranch, and ITLFN. It tastes like f***ing nickels.
Rated everyone 10 and up.
What I would give to win a sweepstakes dinner with that guy. The ESRB, the narcs who made us play Simpsons Hit and Run instead of Grand Theft Auto 3. They've played a major role in helping to mitigate some video game controversies, even when there's been more of them after the rating system was established. Media has always been under scrutiny for being bad influences on our youth. Television, film, music, literature, all have had countless controversies surrounding them in terms of content. Rock and roll was thought to corrupt the youth when it debuted. Schindler's List was broadcast on network television unedited. You can tell that ruffled a few feathers. Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom and Gremlins were both rated PG and featured some not-so-PG elements, and I'm still not allowed to read Catcher in the Rye. But video games were always seen as the worst of all those mediums. With a violent movie, you're watching a killer. With a violent video game, you are the killer. There have been so many controversies surrounding games. Pinball machines were outlawed for a while due to being considered gambling, leading to 70s arcade games facing outcry, the game Death Race shocking many for its portrayal of running over gremlins. Gotcha's controls were designed to look like Custer's Revenge on Atari 2600, doing the whole Custer's Revenge thing. And as the years went on, technology advanced, and violent video games weren't, oh, it kinda looks like you're killing people. They were more like video games as a whole were leading up to that moment. Video games were becoming more graphic and thus raised more eyebrows. In the arcade, games like Splatterhouse just rubbed blood and gore into your face. Narc was an incredibly violent one where you blew up dozens of people, but they were all drug dealers and the game had an anti-drug message. And of course, Mortal Kombat. The fighting game craze started with Street Fighter II in 1991, and a year later, Mortal Kombat came out and had to stand out from the crowd. It utilized digitized graphics, which looked insane at the time. It was so realistic. But also to help it stand out, it had a little help from our friend Gore. The game already caused tons of controversy due to this, but it was multiplied exponentially when the game made its way to home consoles, especially the Sega Genesis. Positioning the Sega Genesis as the more adult console, Sega felt the need to live up to that reputation by allowing more mature games on the system while also imposing less censorship than Nintendo. This was famously done with the home versions of Mortal Kombat. While both the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis versions initially lacked the blood and gore of the arcade version, all you had to do on the Genesis was enter in that sweet, sweet cheat code to enable it. While this made the Genesis port a hit with kids, it didn't bode well with parents, and even the US government. December 9th, 1993 was the day a congressional hearing was held to discuss violent video games and a potential system to rate the games based on their content and themes. Mortal Kombat was a major talking point alongside the games Lethal Enforcers, Night Trap, and later on Doom. Yeah, the content in these games were more mature than others, but a lot of the examples of things these games did that went too far feel a bit over-exaggerated. Lethal Enforcers used a blue toy gun and had you shooting bad guys as a police officer. Night Trap was a full-motion video game for the Sega CD that was as harmless as a lame direct-to-video B-movie. And Mortal Kombat, yeah, I have no excuse for that one. Representatives for Nintendo and Sega were present, with Nintendo's Howard Lincoln standing strong and just throwing Sega under the bus, acting like Night Trap was the most heinous thing ever constructed by man.
Obviously, it would not pass our guidelines. This game, which as you've indicated, promotes violence against women, simply has no place in our society.
This scene from Night Trap was the one everybody got up in arms about. You can't look at this scene and say, oh man, this is poisoning the minds of our youth. Like, what's going on here? To anyone watching this scene, it looks like a bunch of burglars are pumping a girl's neck with some machine, which led to everybody saying, I don't know what's going on, but I don't like it. Even though at the time of the hearing there would be no technical way for Night Trap to run on a Nintendo console, Lincoln made one thing very clear.
And let me say that for the record, I want to state that Night Trap will never appear on a Nintendo system.
Nintendo wasn't immune to criticism during the hearing, but Sega was getting absolutely slaughtered, mainly due to the significant increase in mature themes with games on Sega platforms, with Mortal Kombat's blood and their own game Night Trap, they had it rough that day. In their defense, Sega initiated their own rating system a few months before the hearing, GA for general audiences, MA13 for 13-year-olds and older, and MA17 for 17-year-olds and older. They were blasted for possibly only using a rating system to fight the backlash and due to the age ratings being too vague, even though the ESRB ratings are basically the same thing!
This is a copy of the packaging. There was no rating on this game at all when the game was introduced. Small children bought this at Toys R Us, and he knows that as well as I do. When they started getting heat about this game, then they adopted the rating system and put ratings on it.
While a lot of the arguments made during this time were obviously kind of uninformed and pretty silly, it simply made sense for video games to receive content ratings just like movies and television, especially considering the drastic differences between content and games. They weren't necessarily trying to censor games, rather making sure consumers were aware of what they were buying. More hearings were held later in 1994, and it was agreed upon most game companies to initiate a game rating system, with major retail outlets making it clear they would not buy games without a rating. That year would see the creation of the Entertainment Software Rating Board, or the ESRB, an organization that gives video games age-appropriate ratings. Developers send in videos of their projects showcasing standard gameplay and what could be deemed more objectionable content to receive one of initially 5 ratings: early childhood, kids to adults, teen, mature, or adults only. Later in 1998, kids to adults was renamed to everyone, and in 2005 the new everyone 10 and up rating was introduced with Donkey Kong Jungle Beat. Because this game couldn't have possibly been rated E for everyone, that's fucking ridiculous. Later the design of the ratings changed to pure black letters, with a slight design revision in 2013. Good? Remember these spray paint stencil designs? There's something oddly charming about the old school look of these ratings, especially the K to A one, even though I definitely prefer E for everyone, as it's way more straightforward and clear. Back during the GameCube, PS2, and Xbox era, it felt like there was a nice variety of games rated E, T, and M. Nowadays, it feels more like it's everything or nothing. Honestly, how many times have you seen a T-rated game this generation? Of course, there's the elusive EC and AO. EC is fairly uncommon, mainly used on edutainment games on the PC. ESRB's website claims that only 289 games have been given the rating. On the exact opposite side of the spectrum, Adults Only is by far the rarest rating, with only 27 games rated as such. Now, there's really not a ton of games rated AO for a few reasons, one of them being the fact that most AO rated games are basically another being the fact that all console manufacturers have a policy against AO games, stating that they aren't allowed on the platforms, and similarly, most retail chains won't carry products rated AO. This is the main reason we don't see the rating too often. If developers actually want to sell their game and it happens to get rated AO, they have to go in there and change some things up. More recently, the game Agony received the rating, and the developers had to tone the violence down to go full-on M-rated so it could be released on consoles. Due to the Big Three's policies, the majority of AO games have only appeared on PC, exceptions being the Philips CDI and a DVD game. However, we do have 2 more examples of AO games on consoles, one being Thrill Kill on the PS1. The game got hit with an AO rating, but never released commercially. You can find the ROM online crazy easily though. The other one was Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, so that's why CJ isn't in Smash Brothers. After the game's released, an unfinished sex scene was found in the game's files, later dubbed as the Hot Coffee mod. It wasn't accessible without hacking the game, but people were angry, even though the game was already rated M. And like I said, it wasn't accessible without hacking. It was nothing special. You get the same experience from watching 2 action figures going at it, but it was a big enough deal that the game was re-rated AO and pulled from shelves, which led to Rockstar re-releasing the game to re-achieve an M rating, which is why you'll see many copies of San Andreas with 2nd edition written on them. A similar situation went down with Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, where a random somebody made a nude mod for the game. And it was discovered deep within the game's files existed the art the mod used for the nudity. That was uncalled for. Nowadays, it feels like more mature content is getting the pass within lower age ratings. Indigo Prophecy's unedited PC release was originally given an AO rating, but recently with the release of an uncensored remastered version, it was given an M. Also, Galgun Double Peace is a game where you shoot pheromones at girls and it's rated E for everyone. Guys, society finally accepts us. It was a misprint. Sometimes a game's rating can leave you perplexed, like, how the f***? How are so many Kirby games rated E10+? Like, I get it, Kirby games can get kind of intense, but too intense for a 7-year-old? Games in series well known for being one specific rating can change things up at a moment's notice, and it weirds me out. Dark Souls? Oh yeah, big M-rated series. Okay, Batman Arkham series. Well, Phoenix Wright, oh come on. Fight Night, an EA Sports title, easy contender for family fun, Jesus. Would you look at this, ESRB.org has a description of content found in games that could be objectionable. I gotta say, many M-rated games definitely have a hearty dose of fucking shit. With the ESRB being around for nearly 25 years, it's maintained its place as one of the most important aspects of the gaming industry. That, with the inception of digital games, kids can buy as many M-rated games as they want. Like, kid walks into the store, buys PlayStation Network bucks, goes home, buys Bloody McSex Scene the game, and becomes Genghis Khan. Like, come on, I thought we got rid of that guy. Disregarding that, so many parents just buy their kids M-rated games with no second thought. They just don't look at the ratings and then blame the game for being too vulgar for their kids. Why don't you actually be a parent and regulate what media your child consumes rather than blaming the media itself? Different people are into different things, meaning not every piece of media produced is going to be G-rated. That's true concerning everything, especially video games. Most video games that garner controversy for being unsuitable for children are already rated M. But is that ever brought up when all these big shots who know nothing about video games talk about how video games are corrupting society? No, they just talk about how the newest Call of Duty is poisoning our children when, guys! It's absolutely ridiculous how hard it is for people to notice the bold black letter in the corner of these games. Well, I'm taking a stand. We need to expand the size of these things. It's for the kids. Hey all, Scott here. Big day for me. I finally bought a shoelace. It's really firm, and on one end we have a USB connector. That's pretty unique. And on the other end, oh damn it, this always happens to me. The PlayStation 2 was my mortal enemy in 2003. It was all about my GameCube back then, when all my other friends had these monstrosities with the things on the bottom of the controller and the DVD player and more games, and it didn't matter, okay? The GameCube was better. I was a kid. You really just wanted to defend the stuff you had in comparison to your friends. It's all about feeling superior, and that's what console wars were all about. I don't need to do that anymore. I know I'm more than the products I happen to own. I've grown up, I'm more mature, and I don't need to resort to childish arguments when talking about why the Nintendo Switch is better than the stupid fucking Xbox One. However, even considering my loyalty to the GameCube, there was one thing the PlayStation 2 had that made me consider adultery: the Eye Toy. Bet you weren't expecting to hear that today. 3 reasons to buy the PlayStation 2. 1, 2, 3. Back when I was younger, the idea of being on a television was insane. That was where Nick at Night goes, not me. Even just watching home movies played back on the TV felt like a special occasion. To see yourself on the screen was such a cool experience. Stack that up with putting your own content in a video game. I love the whole idea of making my own video game outside of the act of making my own video game. I squealed over in-depth character creators or stage builders or just having the ability to put more personal touches in a game to truly make it feel like your own. Couple these two desires together and we have ourselves a product 7-year-old Scott pointed at in the store. Eventually, I found a PlayStation 2 at a garage sale for $10, an Eye Toy at a GameStop for $2, and an Eye Toy game for $1. I have never made back that investment. So the Eye Toy, it's a webcam. I'm not one to lie. It plugs into the PlayStation 2 via USB. You can adjust the angle, adjust the focus. It's just a webcam for the console, but with a little bit of love, you can use it as a camera for your computer. You can use the Eye Toy as a shitty flashlight with 2 LEDs on the front, one blue to denote it's on, one red to tell you to turn on some lights. Oh my god, and it also has a built-in microphone. I've eaten things more complicated than this. It's a no-nonsense camera for the PlayStation 2, and that's all it really is. There's a silver revision of it out there, and that's all there is to say about that. But you didn't buy an Eye Toy for the bumper sticker, you bought it for the games. While the Eye Toy itself wasn't technologically advanced, it was all about how games utilized it. I mean, standard webcams can do some crazy stuff. You ever use Photo Booth on Macs? Like, humans made this? So let's see just how the games utilize the camera. Let's put the GameCube in the closet so it never has to witness what I'm about to do. There were a total of 25 games that required the Eye Toy, with only 8 of them releasing here in North America. Yes, officer, I have all the North American Eye Toy games. Now, there were a bunch of PS2 games that supported Eye Toy, but it was totally optional and was just for putting your face in the game or extra minigames or whatever. The Eye Toy launched on November 4th, 2003 over here in a box that is fucking terrifying. It's watching me. Alongside the camera, the game Eye Toy Play was included, so let's give this a try first. Eye Toy Play will never die. It's one of those worthless PS2 games you always see at used game stores and thrift shops, going for the low price of please take it. This is supposed to be a textbook example of Eye Toy usage, a game that shows us what Eye Toy is capable of. So what exactly can Eye Toy do? Nothing. Like I said, this is just a stupid webcam. The games do all the magic here. We get this introduction video to Eye Toy giving us the rundown as to just what exactly we're supposed to do with this. Clear the space, step back a bit, put yourself in the center of the screen. If we want to close out of a game, cover up the camera to avoid the NSA, and it does state we can technically cheat in Eye Toy games by standing relatively close to the camera, but where's the fun in that? It's me! This is Eye Toy Play. To select any options on a menu, you have to hold your hand over and say goodbye. This is a collection of 12 minigames, and they are as follows. Beat Freak, bang to the beat, makes me feel like a Neanderthal. Kung Fu, a game that makes you look like a fucking nutcase to anybody entering the room. Wishy-washy, clean the windows. Yeah. Soccer craze, keep the ball bouncing with your head, but the Eye Toy doesn't know what that is, so use any appendage. Boxing champ, just punch the air. Again, great for my reputation. UFO juggler, you juggle UFOs. Is there anything else to explain? Is there? Slapstream, you see, I can go on for hours talking some Slapstream, but the PlayStation 2 froze while playing. Plate spinner, keep the plate spinning and from falling over. They are really stretching the definition of the word play here. Disco Stars, it's Simon Says. Yeah. Ghost Eliminator, rub ghosts. Mirrored time, so with this one you have to select all the good icons, but the game messes with the perspective to make it more difficult. Game design students, take note, this is how you make an Eye Toy game. Finally, we have Rocket Rumble. I gave up at this point. Eye Toy Play. Didn't really like this one. Most of the games I got the gist of under 30 seconds and they went on for over 2 minutes. I know I'm gonna be seeing a lot of people saying, oh did you hear what Scott said about Eye Toy Play? Doesn't matter, okay? I don't care about the backlash, it's my opinion. Well, let's try out Eye Toy Groove. Maybe this will make better use of the Eye Toy. It's Beat Freak. It's Beat Freak! I mean, if you really wanted a rhythm game for this thing, which equates to you just moving your hands around, I mean, this does the trick, but you already sort of got this thing in the game packed in with the Eye Toy. How about Sega Superstars? Hey, you know Sega Superstars Tennis and Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing? That series actually started as an Eye Toy game, and what better way to get somebody comfortable with the peripheral? Well, if Choo Choo Rocket's here, then I've gotta trust it. Sega Superstars is... let's see, I got a tattoo of this because I'm gonna be saying this a lot and I have to remember it. An Eye Toy minigame collection. 12 minigames based on Sega games, and we have a lot of variety here. Sonic, House of the Dead, all bases are covered. In the Sonic minigame, we move our hand around to control Sonic running through the tunnel, collect the rings and the Chaos Emeralds. Super Monkey Ball's a bit more interesting. You have to tilt your body back and forth to go through simplistic Monkey Ball courses. Honestly, this wasn't the worst. Now, do I prefer this to a regular Monkey Ball experience? Samba de Amigo, hope you didn't buy Eye Toy Groove because I have bad news for you. Virtua Fighter, hope you didn't play Boxing Champ and Eye Toy Play. Crazy Taxi, oh man, we get to control the taxi. No, you have to grab the attention of the taxi driver by going effing nuts. House of the Dead, remember Kung Fu and Eye Toy Play? Yeah. Space Channel 5, remember Disco Stars? Choo Choo Rocket, leave the bridge up for the Choo Choos, lower the bridge for the Kapu Kapu. Billy Hatcher, his game didn't make it to the PS2, so I hope this is good enough. Virtua Striker, you can't have Sega Superstars without Virtua Striker. Puyo Pop Fever, this one's actually pretty neat. You have to use your body to guide Puyo Puyo pieces into the right colored area. This actually required a bit more calibration than usual for the Eye Toy games and did a solid job detecting my body. Knights, this is another fairly impressive Eye Toy game. You have to position your hands like you're flying to get through the level. I didn't really want to play much more than 30 seconds of this, but Sega, you made the Eye Toy fans proud with this one. That was okay. It was fairly well made and I found it to be a lot more fun than Eye Toy Play. But I'm starting to see this trend where it feels like developers only had like 5 ideas for Eye Toy games and they all just made the same thing. Well, whatever Sega can do, Nickelodeon can sorta kinda do. Nicktoons Movin'. Yes, finally, I can be on screen with my favorite Nickelodeon stars bowling and playing whack-a-mole. This is another Eye Toy minigame collection, but this is obviously made for a much younger audience, not because it's based on Nicktoons or anything, but because these games are so simplistic and short. Like, I'm done with these things in under a minute sometimes, and the concepts are basically whack-a-mole, fix the picture, move the ship. Most of the games worked fine, but there just wasn't anything to them, and they didn't feel that inspired by the shows they were based on. Like, oh yeah, we gotta make a SpongeBob minigame for the Eye Toy, fucking bowling. Well, Eye Toy Play came back with a vengeance. Here's Eye Toy Play 2. I can already tell this is a much more ambitious title than the original. The games here are far more complicated and don't just feel like, wave your hands around and move your head. Air guitar, you actually have to hold your hands like you're holding a guitar, strum and move your hands when it tells you to. Could you imagine Eye Toy Play 1 doing this? Like, my god, they whipped out the big guns for this. Home run, you act like you're hitting a baseball and run by realizing the game's not working right. Knockout, it's Boxing Champ, but with a twist. It's in Eye Toy Play 2. Bubble Pop, pop the blue bubbles, avoid the red ones. I bought this. DIY, various minigames about doing down and dirty housework. Again, this shows how Play 2 is a lot more ambitious than the first game, but DIY is not a game you're gonna say, finally, they made a game about this. Drummond, wow, they made the same games this many times. Goal attack, so the way this game works is really bizarre. You have to stop soccer balls from entering the goal, but it's not like the soccer game in Eye Toy Play or something, no. You have to shift your body left and right, and maybe sometimes you'll do so in the actual game. This one didn't work well for me. Secret agent, so you have to complete tasks without getting spotted or by staying still in a spotlight. Honestly, this was a cute and clever use of the Eye Toy. Table tennis, it's as raw as it gets. Playing table tennis with your bare hands. It's from the perspective of your opponent, but it actually works pretty okay. Kung 2, the long-awaited sequel to Kung Fu, which is to say it's Kung Fu again. I mean, why change what worked so well the first time? They saw the responses to Eye Toy play. Mr. Chef, we have to put burgers together and grate cheese.
Next game.
Monkey bars, we have to choose which direction this thing should go in to get to the bottom.
This is fun.
So probably my favorite part of this game was the secret agent portion, so let's give Eye Toy Operation Spy a go. I had so many damn problems setting this game up. It has to scan your face to sign you in like a spy, but it barely worked. It kept flickering in and out. I'd get on the ground up close to the camera, and when it wouldn't work, I'd get up and my head would trigger the back button and I had to go through everything all over again. I mean, this is just a little spy game, you know, like those spy things out there for kids. Yeah, they made a game out of them. Actually, it seemed like Sony was really pushing the Eye Toy as a security device.
Kinda.
Eye Toy Play 2 had this feature where you could leave the Eye Toy running as a security camera and it would capture what goes on in your living room. That'll scare off the burglars.
Oh, he's got an Eye Toy!
Well, if anything, we can repurpose the Eye Toy as a security camera. 2 more games. Eye Toy Kinetic. It's a workout tool. Holy shit. You really think I'm capable of remembering this motion? I mean, this works, but the fact you can cheese the Eye Toy so much makes using it as a workout tool require a lot of self-restraint. Finally, we have Eye Toy Anti-Grav, developed by Harmonix. Alright, okay. It's a hoverboard racing game, really fitting in with the rest of the Harmonix crowd. You don't even see yourself on the screen, you just control a racing game with the Eye Toy. So that is the entire North American Eye Toy library. Now, there's a lot more in Europe. Europe loves the Eye Toy. There are over 10 million of these things sold, which means it definitely didn't flop, but nobody talks about this thing.
I think I know why. The concept was awesome, but the execution, while it mostly worked, I think it left a lot to be desired. Like I said, it feels like they only had a handful of ideas on how to use the Eye Toy, and developers just kept on repeating them in their own minigame collections. Many of these games just feel like variations of whack-a-mole. Move your hand in the right place at the right time, and it's really easy to fake out the Eye Toy and not actually do what it wants you to do. It still has some charm to it all, but there is almost no reason to play these games now. They are all so simplistic and short and not that fun that it just makes the Eye Toy a relic from the past and not much else. But hey, I finally got the Eye Toy out of my system, which means I can finally focus on just buying a shoelace. I went to the store to be continued, and I picked up my shoes aren't ready for this kind of commitment. Hey y'all, Scott here. Are your games too balanced? Do you suffer from not being a dirtbag enough? Want to commit video game adultery? Well, might I recommend cheat codes? Before I use cheat codes, I look like this. And look at me now.
Cheat codes, what separated the men from the scumbags! They were a way of life for a while. After playing a game for a bit, what better way to get more out of it than to enter in some sweet, sweet button inputs on a random menu to see some crazy stuff. A cheat code can be anything that's generally a secret command you enter in a game to change something up, and it seemed that almost every game had them for a while. Cheat codes were on the rise and were at their peak in the 5th and 6th generation of consoles, until absolutely plummeting into obscurity during the 7th. I assume cheat codes aren't as much of a thing these days due to video games being taken more seriously with stuff like online leaderboards and esports. Cheating is just more frowned upon now. Like, you cheat in Mario Tennis 64, you're the playground's messiah. You cheat in Mario Tennis Aces, the neighbors get alerted when you move in near them. Personally though, I didn't really use cheat codes to specifically cheat at games. I used them to just have fun. Rarely did I ever use them to get past a tough level or something. I was always into the weird and wacky cheat codes, stuff that changed physics, altered your appearance, or gave you a bunch of upgrades just to mess around for an afternoon. Now, potentially, the first cheat code ever was in Manic Miner on the ZX Spectrum in 1983. Typing 6031769 while playing allowed you to go to any cavern in the game. But let's be real here. This doesn't hold a candle to this. The Konami code, the most well-known cheat code in existence. You rattle off an up, up, down, down, left, right, BA start in a handful of Konami games and you come face to face with a variety of different outcomes. Of course, the most famous thing the Konami code did was give the player 30 lives in Contra, but it also did the same thing in Life Force, gave you most of the power-ups in Gradius, and unlocked all the songs in Beat Mania for the Game Boy Color. Yeah! The NES era of cheat codes primarily consisted of giving you more lives or continues. For example, Super Mario Bros. Had a secret continue code. When you lose all your lives, you hold A, B, and push start to at least continue at the beginning of the world you died in. However, some codes definitely stood out more than others. Sometimes it could be nothing more than hold A, bird fans, and other times, they could be really cool secrets. Easy example would be the Justin Bailey code in Metroid. Entering that in the password screen allowed you to play as Samus without her power suit and sporting green hair. A game with a password screen was almost guaranteed to have cheats, it's just the perfect opportunity to throw some in there. With that said, passwords were ways to allow you to resume your progress in games without save functions, so technically just entering a password for a level you haven't gotten to yet can be considered a cheat code. Want to skip everything in Mega Man 2? Well, here you go! Throwing it out there, I was playing SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom on my Game Boy Advance on the school bus, as everybody born in 1997 did. I entered a bunch of random junk on the password screen, and bam, I unknowingly entered the code for the final boss, and I will be perfectly honest, that was probably my proudest gaming moment. Now after the NES era, cheat codes started to get really fun. Another famous one was definitely the blood code in Mortal Kombat on the Sega Genesis. The SNES version was a wimp, it was censored and sweaty. The Genesis version was the real deal, and even though it technically looked worse, everybody flocked to it for one lone reason. Entering this code enabled the blood, and that's what Mortal Kombat is all about. Sonic the Hedgehog's had a great history with cheats, specifically the level select codes, allowing you to access any level you want right from the get-go on the title screen. But what's really special is the debug mode. This is hell. GoldenEye on the Nintendo 64 was famous for being a pioneer in two mediums, first-person console shooters and big head mode cheat codes. Come on, you can't beat this. This is wonderful. It was in a fair amount of games, including NBA Jam as well. The Tony Hawk's Pro Skater series had loads of codes, even offering a menu specifically for cheat codes. Man, nothing can ever live up to moon gravity. Look at this! But in this day and age where cheat codes have all but vanished, one company has been doing God's work and cramming them in almost every game they can. Rockstar continues to pop cheats in their games, most famously with the Grand Theft Auto series. Cheat codes allow me to play GTA in the only way I could ever imagine playing GTA, with no shit giving intact. The one I remember using cheat codes on the most was San Andreas. Now, I mainly played this one on a computer, and not just any computer, a Mac, which means... But the fun thing about that version of San Andreas was that the codes had to be typed into the keyboard, meaning a lot of them were pretty easy to remember because they were just phrases. Chitty Chitty Bang Bang made the cars fly, while you could also have some super hops and have gluttony reign supreme. But one of my favorite cheats to enable in Grand Theft Auto would always be entering a code for an insane arsenal of weapons, nabbing a hefty wanted level, and just seeing how long I could survive. This is what Grand Theft Auto always ends up being whenever I play it. Now, I mainly remember nabbing cheat codes from magazines, specifically the Tips and Tricks code books. I never subscribed to these, but I would pick them up sometimes at the drugstore. This one always made me feel really anxious, like Bowser and ass together? My hand would always cover this portion, just in case I would get diagnosed with adult supervision. Tips and Tricks code book for Sonic's 15th anniversary. This was the one I thumbed through the most as a kid. It has a huge section on all previous Sonic games up until that point, and has just about any and all games you could possibly want codes for covered as well. The cheat code paperback book market was at the top of its game back then. I mean, come on, name a better way to find out that you can change the bowling ball color in Wii Sports. The origins of cheat code books can be traced back to Nintendo Power, which had its own various tips and cheats you could read up on, which later brought life to strategy guides and books dedicated to cheats for all you top players out there. Anybody else find it weird that cheat code reading material was almost always marketed for supreme video game players when cheats are used to make games, you know, easier? But sometimes, cheat codes created by the game developers just aren't enough, and you want to delve into the immoral side of gaming. Cheat devices. Various products have been released over the years that alter game code to let you do all kinds of things God forbid Nintendo see. Infinite lives, crazy physics, anything's game here. There are loads of cheat devices that have appeared over the course of time, like Game Shark and Codebreaker, but these are the two I have, the original Game Genie on NES and an action replay for the GameCube. Game Genie is definitely one of the most well-known cheat devices, and one of the first of its kind as well. Being an unlicensed accessory for the NES that let you make Mario jump higher than Nintendo wanted him to, Nintendo f***ing hated it. Nintendo sued Galoob, the makers of the game Genie, citing copyright infringement. This was still the early 90s, so everybody ranging from the US government to the people who actually made video games still were having a hard time figuring out how copyright works with the medium. Since the Game Genie modified game code to do some wild stuff, Nintendo made the argument that their code is copyrighted and couldn't be tampered with. But the thing was, Galoob wasn't modifying Clu Clu Land and selling their own version of it. The Game Genie was something the consumer bought after already purchasing an NES game. It's like if you took a book and changed all the periods to commas. I mean, yeah, you're a fucking lunatic, but it's your book, do whatever you want. Nintendo tried their hardest, But in the end, they lost the case, and the Game Genie lived on. There was a version for the Super Nintendo and Game Boy, and the Genesis and Game Gear versions were licensed by Sega themselves, a bit of a jab at Nintendo since they despised the Game Genie. After actually playing with this thing, it can be a bit finicky, but it's an absolute blast. Look at this, I'm cheating! The Game Genie came with a code book that covered a handful of popular NES games and codes to pop into them. You just insert the game into the Game Genie and then insert the Game Genie into the console. Easy stuff. You then have to enter some codes. You can enter multiple codes or just one. Many of them are totally lame, like infinite lives, whatever, who cares? You can start Super Mario Bros. 3 with the frog suit. I've had nightmares about this before. It's great to finally face my fears. However, the device is useful if you want games to be a bit easier potentially, like the Zelda code makes you invincible, and this River City Ransom one boosts all your stats from the get-go. But I'm a simple man. Give me a code that makes my jump weird and I'm all on board. This is amazing. The Action Replay is a similar line of cheat devices that actually got its start all the way back on the Commodore 64. However, unlike the Game Genie, Action Replay just kept on coming out for seemingly every platform for a while. Game Genie was a lot more wholesome, you just look through the codebook and have fun. Action Replay is way more hacky feeling. The versions for different systems vary, however many can allow you to not only mess with game code and cheat, but play import games, some homebrew stuff, and use save states. This is a version I have for the GameCube, and yeah, it does have codes for Cars the video game. I was wondering when you'd ask. For some reason, they put the disc in the same packaging you'd see for batteries, but whatever. We pop the disc in and bam, I'm overwhelmed. In some respects, Action Replay is more user-friendly than the Game Genie due to having all the codes built in. You just select what cheats you want, push start, swap out the Action Replay disc for the game you want, and there we go. If you guys needed proof I was good at Sonic Heroes, here, max rings and points 1 second into playing. Here we go, Super Mario Sunshine with cheats! Here we go, Super Mario Sunshine with cheats! This is terrifying. I'm crazy fast, I can jump and do this. Double dash, we have infinite stars, this is boring. Pac-Man World 2. Moving on. Action Replay is one of the few ways to obtain the rarer NES games in Animal Crossing and totally allows me to grab all trophies in Melee with ease. Gotta be honest, I never owned any cheat devices as a kid. I played Donkey Konga how Nintendo wanted me to, damn it! But these are pretty fun. I know a lot of other people use cheat devices on their DS for stuff like Pokemon, but me? I personally stuck to cheat codes baked into the game. There was just something magical about successfully inputting a code and experiencing the game in a way you've never seen before. They're just straight up fun, and it really bums me out that they're rarely seen in games anymore. I guess companies just thought, oh yeah, we can charge for cheats, and just threw stuff like alternate costumes on online stores. And in terms of cheats that give you infinite lives or whatever, I think developers just find it much more useful to make an accessible easy mode, which I actually kind of agree with. However, I still love cheats, and no matter what, their legacy will always live on. At least we'll always have the memories of cheat codes and the old games to still use them on, which is great, seriously. How else am I supposed to beat Wheel of Fortune on NES? Can't beat this sucker without the moon gravity cheat. Hey all, Scott here, and I'm only 12 virgin points away from being eligible for a V-card. I need to find the quickest possible way to not get laid. If I wanted to get laid, I'd talk about Donkey Kong Barrel Blast for 10 minutes, but nope! Today I gotta stick with the trends to nab my virgin points with ease, but how exactly will I do that? By looking at the most viral things on the planet, of course, and the only thing more viral than influenza has got to be this garbage. You know, the games you see played on YouTube by screaming people with dyed hair and videos with all caps titles. Yep, viral video games. You may ask what constitutes a game being viral. I'm mainly talking the stuff that's taken the world by storm within the past decade or so that really wouldn't have gone anywhere without the internet. Whether it be because of online multiplayer, seeing reactions to people playing the games, sharing theories surrounding them, you know, that kind of stuff. Well, let's plop into it. These are viral sensations that people can't get enough of, or they could get enough of until they got enough of. You ever wander around in the woods at night and worry that Benito Mussolini is still on the loose and is coming after you? Well, Slender is the closest we can get to that experience. I'm sorry, Slender, the 8 Pages. When this game hit it big, it was simply titled Slender, and then they made another game. Oh shit, they made another game? Well, with the introduction of a sequel, they subtitled this one, The 8 Pages. The game stars this flashlight, some grass, a few trees, and... Oh shit, it's a white guy! You have to collect 8 pages scattered across this small forest that's really easy to get lost in. These pages feature all this chicken scratch on them, which could mean anything. Collecting the pages is basically all we have to do, In addition to avoiding Slender Man, a supernatural creature known for orangutan arms and child abduction. The thing is, I don't find Slender Man in general scary. How can you be scared of something without a face? He can't even fucking sneeze. The only thing that's kind of scary about this is when Slender Man randomly appears, the musician passes out on the piano. And even then, that's just a jump scare. Nothing really sticks with you at all. I won't say the game doesn't have its tense moments. Walking into this small bathroom, for example, is pretty freaky. Like, you know it's easy to get cornered in here. But the game just relies on jump scares. You try to collect all 8 pages, and even when you do, all that happens is Slender Man eventually does whatever the hell this is. Happy Wheels is a physics-based game that plays in your web browser. You can choose from a variety of vehicle-driving characters with a seemingly unlimited supply of user-created levels at your disposal. Many stages are filled with hazards that can brutally wound or kill you, which adds to the fun. Definitely one of the most entertaining games to play in your browser. You know those bears they sell at Hot Topic? Yeah, they made a game out of them. Five Nights at Freddy's is all about looking both ways and stopping Chuck E. Cheese robots from screaming. I never liked this series. This title has some of the most brutally simple gameplay out there. You have to keep an eye on your power levels and make sure you're not overusing your means of monitoring and stopping these things from giving you a scare right in front of your face. I mean, yeah, you can analyze the game all you want, say how its simple gameplay is what makes it so interesting and well designed, or how the sweet, sweet lore of the series is what keeps you coming back. Not me though, I never personally found appeal in the series. I'll just give it the coveted Not My Thing award. Now the developer Scott Cawthon made a sequel, so I could definitely try out that one to see if it grabs me. And if that one doesn't do it, how about this one? Or this one? Maybe this one. This one might do it.
Hello, this is Scott Cawthon.
Stop! QWOP is a human simulator that shows us just how amazing it is that we can all move. You have to control your muscles with the Q, W, O, and P keys on the keyboard, and as a self-proclaimed walker, I have to say this game really does emphasize the struggles us humans have with walking sometimes. You ever just this, everybody? Finally, the cure for all sex. Minecraft. I made lows. I've actually never really gotten into Minecraft. I played a little on the iPad, but that was about it, and I dropped it after playing it a few times. From what I've gathered, you play as geometry and you, just kind of do whatever you want. You craft whatever you want, build whatever you want. It's truly a sandbox game. There is this survival mode where the zombies come out at night, which makes things more interesting. Lucky for me, I'm a fucking genius. Nothing can stop me from up here, damn it. Next up, we're looking at Roblox. So I've never been in the know on what a Roblox is, so I'm signing up under the name Anybody Like Roblox? Just a question. After getting shot into the site, it turns out Roblox is a game creation tool where players share their games made using the Roblox Studio. After finally jumping into a game, I can officially say I am more confused now than I was before playing, and nobody will answer my questions. So we can waddle around and jump, and let me ask you, does this make you feel okay? But man, with enough determination, I can totally not get laid by playing this. On my patented laid scale, I hereby give Roblox 4 sex out of 10. Doki Doki Literature Club, a horror game that isn't just due to cowering in fear when your parents walk in on you playing it. But let's throw that genre out of the window and go into the game blind. Ooh, it's imaginary sex of the game! I'll definitely give this a download. Huh. Forget that warning. I'm going with a name that'll really help me in the long run with swooning these girls over. This is a dating sim visual novel type game where we talk to these girls, speak to them, and have conversations. It's like I'm really trying to date a cartoon character. And there's so many to choose from. Sayori, our longtime best friend, Yuri, the shy one, Natsuki, the bitch, Monica, the leader of the bunch. Which one could I possibly choose? Well, that made my decision easier. What I admire so much about Doki Doki is that it takes the concept of a deceiving game that acts like it's one thing when it's really another, and goes farther with it than I think any piece of media ever has. It takes a fair amount of time until the psychological horror elements nudge their ways in, and that allows the game to create this sense of trust with the player. By the time everything's about to go down, I feel like most players were like, yup, this is my game. I'm totally gonna date the shit out of Jesus Christ! That is how you scare a player, and it's done really well. The only major problem I have with Doki Doki is that it really demands a totally blind playthrough for you to get the most out of it. Thing is, that's almost impossible. We have a warning in the beginning basically saying, this game is f***ed, turn back. And with all the hubbub about this game online, even if you didn't know this was a horror game, I think you'd at least expect that something was up with it. You could have a friend set up the game for you where they say, hey, play this. But even at that point, I think most people would respond, why the hell are you making me play this? What's wrong with it? The game works best in this perfect world where you're playing it because you just wanted to play a visual novel dating sim, but we're thrown for a loop when things get murdery. Regardless of a totally blind playthrough being somewhat unobtainable, Doki Doki Literature Club is a really smart game that does horror incredibly well. Baldi's Basics is stupid. What does this game squirt onto the internet? Oh, another it isn't what it initially seems to be game. It goes from educational game to not that. I assume it's trying to pull off horror, but it just ends up feeling like a lackluster and a half attempt at what Doki Doki Literature Club did. Doki Doki deceives the player by comforting them in this world of pure anime, maybe sprinkling in some hints here and there, but finally hitting the player with something so out of left field terrifying that it works incredibly well as a horror game. Baldi's Basics is like if Doki Doki started with one line of simple dialogue and then blam, death. That's not nearly as scary, and it just devalues the entire point of the game even existing. Like, we do a math problem and then, uh-oh, the teacher is chasing us. This one's just pretty lame to me. Now brace yourselves, because I am about to lose all credibility. That's right, guys. I'm finally playing Fortnite. I've seen the requests. And would you believe it only takes this long to not get laid? I tried to name myself, and may I ask, how many skarts are there in the world? It seemed like every name I tried they had a problem with until I finally landed on a winner. Anyways, Fortnite is this battle royale game where you're just trying to be the last player alive, or last group alive. Things are off to a great start with this sky bus. I glide down, and you know what? What's the rush? We're gonna take our time with this one. I reach the ground and come face to face with my first enemy in the game. I use his organs to build a house, and safety's an understatement. There's this cool portal thing that seems interesting. Oh, oh, finally another person. Here's some homicide. Oh, we have another. Shit, somebody grab a Kodak! For max effectiveness, I'm just gonna keep swinging this X indefinitely. Oh, damn it. It's easy to see why these games went viral. They all have elements that make them easily understandable, interesting, or entertaining to watch others play. But does that make them automatically good games? A lot of these are one-trick ponies, and just because these games hit it big doesn't necessarily mean they're good. It's obvious that for many independent developers to get their names out there these days, they feel the need to make games like this that really appeal to the modern climate of the internet, with reaction videos and online multiplayer being the craze. It's just in many of these games' cases, they prioritize the idea of becoming viral in comparison to simply being a decent game. Not all of them are like this, but many are, and it's kinda why I don't see myself jumping aboard whenever small games like these hit it big. With that being said, don't spew hatred over a game just because it's popular. Fortnite and Minecraft get barfed on all the time just because they're huge. Listen, I played both of these, and I can easily tell you they're both high-quality games. They may not be my thing, and that's perfectly fine. It's also fine if you actually immensely dislike the games, but come on, it's pretty obvious when people are just complaining because of popularity. That's all fine and good, but I'm only one virgin point away from being eligible for a V card. Maybe just mentioning viral games can give me that 1 point. There's Facade, Getting Over It, Amnesia, Donkey Kong Barrel Blood. No! I'm never gonna be a virgin at this rate. Hey y'all, Scott here. It's time to kick back, relax, get your heart rate questionably low, because today, I'm gonna be showing you what happens when drywall and video games come together. Video games are pretty cool. They got polygons and they were a waste of $40. But you see, they require hardware, electricity, space, wasting $40, and when you have a lot of physical video games and consoles, you need walls. The game room is a concept I've fallen in love with. I've always been big into the whole man cave thing. As a kid, whenever I'd go over to somebody's house and it had a basement filled with a bar and a pool table and all that useless garbage they probably never used, I would always squee. Having something like that would have been awesome. I wanted a downstairs susceptible to flooding too. I never had a basement, but I've always wanted and still really want one. All nice and cozy, filled with this and this and this. I always wanted a giant room dedicated to video games with that sort of man cave vibe. But sometimes you have to make do with what you got. So years ago, I took my bedroom and turned it into a makeshift game room, studio, living room, office. You can't really have a game room without amassing a cornucopia of games and systems. And prior to 2013, I would constantly do the unthinkable and sell the games I wasn't playing anymore. Just add me to the list already. This was my setup in 2011. Nothing screams I'm 14 and trying to make the most out of what I got than this. I was always interested in collecting games and the history of the medium in general. But of course, when you're that young, you kind of have to sell games so you can get new ones, and the only game store I could really do that at was GameStop. Because of that, I couldn't really keep a massive collection consistently and couldn't really start buying the retro stuff. I was limited to basically whatever GameStop had in stock. Now 2013 comes around, and with me being able to drive myself and having an actual job, I could start collecting video games and build up what would be my game room. I wanted a room friends could walk into and see so many games spanning so many consoles we could all play together. I wanted a cool and effective setup for playing games and watching movies, an organized collection of the games I loved and always wanted to play. A room somebody could walk into and go, "F***, you got Fling Smash?" This was what I wanted back in June of 2013, and that was the time I started working towards building a game room. And a full 6 months later, this was after I started? I think I had some NES and SNES games somewhere else. In this later picture, I moved them all to the bottom of this bookshelf. I'm sure you can tell where my hatred for Platinum Hits and Player's Choice started, and what better 3 titles to start rebuilding my GameCube collection with than Mario Golf, WarioWare, and Wave Race? Yeah, only the necessities. Where the hell were my 3DS games? I have the system, I had games for it back then, where were they? Back then, the consoles I had set up were a Wii U, Xbox 360, and Retron 3. It was one of those aftermarket consoles that played Genesis, NES, and SNES games. To be fair, it did the job. I think for me back then, and for budding collectors, it's a cheap and efficient way to play the original cartridges. I also kept all my boxes for everything, game consoles, accessories, electronics, everything. I just kind of piled them up in the corner. I was worried people wouldn't think I didn't mean business if they didn't see my iPhone 4 box. Over the next few months, I kept on buying more and more stuff every 2 weeks or so, and thus, I had to get serious. I bought a cheap media shelf. I have a love-hate relationship with these. They're called Atlantic media shelves. I'd say if you're just starting to collect, these are great to put games on. They look nice and they're cheap, but the problem is, they're cheap. They just never felt sturdy enough, really. I was always kind of concerned they'd fall over or break or something. I think the most impressive collection increase at this time was the GameCube for me. I amassed some good stuff by this point, including multiple sets of Donkey Kong bongos, again, only the necessities. I loved building the 360 and original Xbox collections, and this was right smack in the middle of the Wii U era, so I picked up new releases as they came out, alongside filling out my Wii library with the must-have games I didn't own already. A few months later, it got to the point where I had to get even more serious. I bought another cheap media shelf. This was a setup I could get behind. It was so balanced, 2 shelves between the TV and game consoles. Sure, this bookshelf never really screamed, "Put an Xbox in me," but it did the job. The classic end labels for my Nintendo 64 games. I printed these off and spanked them on with Scotch tape. Yeah, that didn't work the greatest. It just ended up peeling off like crazy or attracting hair and random stuff, I don't know, like pretzels or something. I was getting a lot more NES games, and my Game Boy collection was sitting peacefully in shambles on a single shelf. This setup was great. It was how I beat Mega Man 2, the way I set up my original PS4 for the first time. I hated it. I changed it half a year later. Let's welcome this beaut of an entertainment center. This was perfect for housing systems, and it looked nice. Yeah, but that meant I had to move the shelves over to the right side of the room, which, hey, if you've seen this room, you know the iconic wall slant. That made putting shelves against it difficult, but it worked in the end. Eventually, I had to take the old bookshelf that was once the stomping grounds for my consoles and use it for my overflow of games and Time Crisis 3. I bought a 3rd cheap media shelf. Oh, hey, Call of Duty Black Ops on the Wii, where it belongs. I eventually did a full-blown switcheroo, moved the TV where the shelves were, moved the shelves where the TV was. Oh, I bought a 4th cheap media shelf. It was then I decided to forego the cheap media shelf lifestyle and enter the realm of Sweden. IKEA is not only the best place to buy furniture, it's the best place. I mean, come on, food court, furniture, for God's sakes, they have dollar rats. I upgraded to a good few IKEA Billy bookcases, and there's not much an IKEA Billy bookcase can't do. I wanted these because they were way sturdier, plus being much deeper allowed for more things to fit in them. The old shelves were about as deep as a standard DVD case. Some things just couldn't fit on them. Problem was, I had to stack 2 of these bookcases. It made things crazy tall. I wouldn't recommend this, but it was all I could have done concerning the amount of games I had and the space I had to work with. Overall, I loved this room. It was where I spent a good chunk of my childhood, and I definitely transformed it into my own little virgin circus, but it was obvious I was outgrowing it. I barely had any room anymore. My computer desk was right smack in front of my NES games. That's no way to store ranking. I needed a room specifically for the games, a room just for the console setup, and a room to just go to sleep. Sleeping in the same room you play Devil's Third and really does something to you. After a certain happened, I moved into my own apartment, and thus we have, bam, a room for games? This is my current game room, and I'm pretty happy with everything as it is. There's not like a ton of room for expansion, but I can definitely make things work if I need more space. But of course, we gotta start here. I have all my main game consoles I consistently play in the living room down the hall. I upgraded the TV stand to this, and invokes the spirit of the original one I used, but has more of these shelves for consoles. I really like this style of TV stand because there's a hole in each section to feed wires through. You see, that's one of my least favorite things about setups. I look slightly behind the TV stand and it's terrifying. I went for more of a wood look compared to the black coat of paint of my old one because while I think the black looked cooler, it showed dust like crazy. This style hides imperfections much better in my opinion. I mainly keep consoles that I use a lot hooked up at all times. Of course, systems like the PS3, 360, OG Xbox, N64, and GameCube are plugged into the dreaded surge protector that's left unplugged and is only plugged in when I want to play any of these systems of doom. I keep them out here because they're systems I have a lot of games for, but I don't play them enough to warrant a greater fire hazard than I already have by leaving everything plugged in all the time. The PS4, Xbox One, Wii U, and Switch are always plugged in just because I play them the most. Of course you may go, wait, you keep the Wii U plugged in? Yeah, I hate me too for saying I still use the Wii U frequently, but it's my way of playing a ton of generations of Nintendo games. I play Wii U, Wii, and Virtual Console games on this thing. Until the Switch gets all or a good chunk of that stuff, I'm leaving this plugged in, unfortunately. But what about the Xbox One? Do I use that frequently? No, but all these systems were kind of made with the intention of being left plugged in. I mean, the PS4 screams at you if you unplug it improperly, so I'll just do what it tells me. I know probably all systems are made with the intention of being left plugged in, but stuff like the Switch just goes into sleep mode, PS4 has rest mode, and these guys are the most modern consoles, so all that adds up to me just leaving these plugged in. I use the Super Retro Trio Plus for playing Genesis, NES, and SNES games. You see, I never grew out of that shitty aftermarket console phase of my life. Now, I mainly use this as a means to play these types of games through HDMI. It's actually pretty damn good, though with the main flaw being that all the games are stretched into widescreen. Would you ever trust somebody that looked like this? A lot of TVs have a feature to squish a widescreen image back to 4:3, and if you're using this console to get a gameplay footage, you can always format the screen properly while editing. It doesn't make it less annoying though. I house most of my controllers in this bookshelf here, with either just one or two in a Ziploc bag. That helps me stay organized and keep the controller wires from tangling up and things getting too funky. Now, the only other game-related doodad I have in my living room is my beloved Galaga arcade OneUp cabinet. I always wanted an arcade machine. I've specifically looked at this one right here, the Pac-Man Arcade Party one. I love the old school Namco arcade titles, Pac-Man, Miss Pac-Man, Rally X, Dig Dug, and definitely Galaga. I've always wanted an old school Namco arcade cabinet with either a few or all of these games I fell in love with. The thing is, arcade machines can be stupid expensive, a pain to move, especially into a smaller apartment like this, and can be tricky to maintain. Arcade OneUp makes these cabinets that are specifically made for at-home use. They're smaller than a regular cabinet, but big enough to still feel like an arcade machine. The base model is supposed to be played while sitting down, but I bought this riser. Is it perfect? No. Is it better than an actual arcade machine? Does it have better controls? Again, no. But everything in my opinion is good enough for the $250 I paid for this. And for casual arcade fans who always wanted an arcade-like experience in their homes, it's perfect. Like yeah, the original machine's quality is way better with like the paint and sticks and buttons, but the OneUp cabs still feel like an arcade machine. Not as good, but it does the trick. It's lightweight, it's easy to move, and I officially have a Galaga arcade machine. That's amazing. It's pretty lame to me that the Namco releases only have 2 games on them each though. They have like a Street Fighter 2 one and these Atari ones that include more games, but here it's just Galaga and Galaxian. I'm sorry, Galaxian is fine, but you give me the choice between the two, I will always play Galaga, so really it has 1 game. I'm hoping for a Namco Museum arcade OneUp cab, something along the lines of the arcade party machine I wanted. Anyways, let's move over to the meat and potatoes, the cream of the crop of any game room. The game room. Here we have Sex Wall. I kept with the Billy bookcases from IKEA, but just like what I did with the TV stand, I opted for this light wood grain style instead of the black. Like I said, the black looks cooler, but it shows too much dust. The modern games start things off, everything's in very rough chronological order of when the systems release. Like the Switch starts, it then goes to Xbox One, PS4, PS3 next for some fucking reason, and Wii U. I plopped the PS4 and PS3 together just because the cases are around the same size and they're both PlayStation consoles. I thought it fit well. The Wii U collection. Oh boy, it's one of my darkest secrets. I own nearly half of the North American library for this thing. It's something I kinda like whittling away at. I'm not necessarily looking to get a full set, but if I get there one day, okay, sure, that's what I'll be known for. I own basically all the good games and nearly all the Nintendo first-party titles, except Mario and Sonic at the Rio 2016 Olympic Games, damn it. Next shelf, we have Wii and GameCube. Wii games, I kinda own all the major ones I've always wanted. I think the last one I was able to check off was Kirby's Dream Collection. There are definitely some I still want, so if I see something I want at a good price, yeah, I'll do the unthinkable and buy it. But overall, I'm pretty content where I'm at. GameCube, similar story. I'm definitely still missing some of the must-haves compared to the Wii, and mainly because GameCube games are just way harder to come by, but I have most of the major ones I want. Xbox 360 and original Xbox. Listen, I love both of these consoles, but they're also in the I've gotten almost everything I really want for them camp, and it saddens me. I generally have an unwritten rule with most consoles. I generally pick my go-to platform for a generation, and that's where I buy most of my multi-platform games. Here, it's PS4. Generation before that, it was the 360. Generation before that, it's the original Xbox. This console is great. It was the most powerful at the time, and on top of that, it has a great library of exclusives. I don't know why my collection splits off and continues all the way over here. I just don't. The retro shelf. Contrary to me being a stupid kid, I grew up with all these systems in one way or another. Whether it was playing the NES at my grandma's house, playing SNES games on the Game Boy Advance, N64 games with my cousins, I just straight up had a Genesis. I love the older games. They're some of my favorites to collect and fiddle around with. NES games are fairly cheap in comparison to the other platforms, especially considering a lot in this collection is just pure garbage. I haven't really delved into the hacks and homebrews market for any system, but I do have the reproduction Nintendo World Championship, Campus Challenge, and PowerFest cartridges for both the NES and SNES. I love these things, they're the coolest to own. SNES games are dumb expensive, so I still have a ways to go, definitely some key titles missing, and collecting N64 has never been my favorite. I'm in the camp that believes the vast majority of games on the platform have aged poorly or just were never that great to begin with. Still, some of my favorite games of all time are on this system, but it's one of my least favorite Nintendo systems to play today. I did buy these end labels on Etsy, I believe from this seller. You just get a full set of all Nintendo 64 game labels, and they do the trick. Genesis, oh my god, I love picking up good Genesis games in the box. It's kind of like people don't talk about some of the best Genesis titles as much as Nintendo systems, so it's just really fun to pick up these games, some of my personal favorites. McDonald's Treasureland Adventures, Ghostbusters, Castlevania Bloodlines, Get Out of My Life, Comic Zone. The final major game shelf is kind of just all the systems I don't have much for, and DS shit. DS, 3DS, my Game Boy Advance games, which I made covers and used DS boxes for years ago. I really should redo these and make new ones for my other GBA games. I printed these off on a garbage inkjet printer. I don't own a lot of original Game Boy and Game Boy Advance cartridges just because they don't come with plastic boxes for them. And it's just hard to warrant spending a good chunk of change on games this tiny that don't come with a case. Don't get me wrong, I care more about the actual games and playing them compared to the cases, but it just makes it harder to remember what Game Boy games I have physically when they're all just kind of in a bag somewhere. Which again, just makes it hard to warrant buying new ones. I should really get into that. I love the Game Boy line. We got these PS1 and Dreamcast collections to spice your day up. Austin Powers Pinball, anyone? PS2 games. The system was never really my thing. I'd always rather play the Xbox or GameCube. Then we have the final shelf area, which is just a bunch of what the hell ever. Afterburner on the Master System, yeah sure, I don't even own one. Star Fox 64 promotional VHS tape, I don't know where else it would go. 2 Sega CD games, 1 Sega Saturn game, and then an awkward long box PS1 game. Yeah, I mean it wouldn't be a collection without them. The next shelf we got all my extra systems or consoles I'm not using right now. Original NES, SNES, the classic editions of said systems, the NES top loader, Dreamcast, Saturn, Genesis 32X, CD, PS2, my original PS4 and Wii, plus containers with all the extra wires and stuff I need for them. Finally, we have my computer desk where I work and evade taxes. And that's the current game room, there's a closet too. Yeah, this is basically where all the extra stuff goes. Boxes, amiibo, books, magazines, other random collectibles. There's definitely an argument to be made the closet of extra stuff is more interesting than the actual game room. As it is, I like the room. I don't have to compromise too much of what I want out of a game room due to the space, and I'm thankful for that. Like, is there anybody who actually stacks games like this voluntarily? Or puts games behind more games? Like, yeah, that saves space, but my god, this is how games were meant to be stored. Everything is alphabetical here. I understand that's a huge undertaking if you have a lot of games, but I started alphabetizing these things long ago, so it's fairly easy to keep up for me. I mean, come on, it's easy to find anything I want. It makes it kind of fun to put new games on the shelf too, because you have to figure out where it goes alphabetically. It's great. An exception I have to alphabetizing is the Zelda games. Normally I file them under L for Legend of Zelda, but the NES titles I put at the very end of the collection. The second one is just called Zelda 2, so it would be apart from the first one regardless. They're both the gold cartridges, so I thought, yeah, it makes sense to cap off the collection with these. I usually do that with sequels, put them together with the connecting games even if it doesn't fit alphabetically. And I'm looking at you, Tomb Raider. I'm very happy with how everything's set up currently. Well, come on, I can dream big, can't I? Scott's dream game room. Well, it'd have to be a basement, totally decked out, nice and cozy. We got all the games organized via the shelves, not a ton of clutter. 2 TVs, a nice big 4K one, and then a CRT for the retro consoles. I'm kinda hoping that in the future, a company that specializes in the retro game market creates a new CRT TV. I mean, that would be expensive as all hell. I don't know how possible that would be. The majority of the parts necessary for these things aren't being produced anymore. But hey, a new CRT specifically designed for retro games, that would be great. If it's never gonna happen, I can always check the dump. I'd be super down to pick up more of the arcade OneUp cabinets if I had the room. Get a little mini home arcade going. Well, who knows, maybe I could finally commit myself to an actual cabinet. But I personally believe arcade OneUp is perfect for at-home use. Again, I still wouldn't keep all consoles plugged in, that's a little ridiculous. Instead, I'd opt to get nice cabinets to store all the systems I don't use frequently. I'd want to display them in a way where maybe all the cords needed to plug them in are in a box that's propping the system up in the cabinet. Of course, a cool looking bar, pool table, or some fun thing like that, air hockey, foosball, maybe even a pinball machine. My goal is to eventually have the greatest man cave ever for a divorced bachelor in his 50s. Game rooms have always fascinated me. I love watching tours of them online, whether in video or just photos, regardless of how big they are even. I don't know about anybody else, but I find a certain beauty in the simplest of game rooms. Don't get me wrong, the huge one with walls lined with games are jaw-dropping sometimes, but the more humble and smaller ones are a bit more engaging for me to look at. It's cool to see all the stuff somebody owns when they can't buy whatever they want. It means they're much more attached to the few games and systems they have. It brings me back to when I first started collecting and started to try to form a game room of my own. Now I'm at this point, and I like it. Things were way more fun back when I was first starting out because I was finally buying all these games I always wanted. But I'm happy where I'm at, and a lot of people in the beginning stages of collecting ask how I was able to afford all this. You see, here's the thing, I bought most of this junk while I was in high school. Most of my paycheck would go towards this stuff. Like, come on, what other expenses did I have back in high school? Medical bills? Please, I've had this dark spot on my thigh for the past 6 years and nothing's happened. I don't need a doctor.
So all in all, I like my game room. There's not much I can really complain about. Except that does happen sometimes. Hey y'all, Scott here. Well, I've done it. I've finally mastered the art of beating video games, all thanks to cheating. Now that I've got that out of the way, I'm gonna use my newfound knowledge to beat games under different circumstances. I've been working on my chili run lately. Every time I hit a button, I have to eat 5 spoonfuls of chili. I'm not even past the menu!
We've all been there, playing Price is Right decades and going, what do I do? I've gotten lost in my fair share of games, whether I have no idea where I should be going, no idea what my next objective is, I just simply didn't understand the directions given to me, I can't find anything. Video games are easily the quickest way to realize I'm an idiot. I remember playing BioShock Infinite in 2013. You could activate an arrow showing you where to go by hitting up. After one playthrough, this controller is useless now. I just don't want to waste my time with some games. I don't want to screw up and take longer than I should to beat it. I just want to do exactly what I'm supposed to do. But that's just not gonna happen. Everybody makes mistakes, just look at everybody. Everybody gets stuck at certain parts of games, or can't complete portions of them without a little bit of help. And apparently helping desperate gamers is a lucrative business. Strategy guides and walkthroughs are the most shameful thing I could ever look at. I don't want to be told the solution to the puzzle, I gotta figure it out myself. I'm no pussy, I'll beat this game with my eyes closed. I am completely lost. I've looked up solutions to problems I've had with games a good number of times, but I always feel this overwhelming sense of shame trickle down anything but my spine. When you figure out a solution to a puzzle on your own, that's pretty much why you play video games. That's where a lot of the satisfaction comes from doing something all on your own or just having that aha moment. And it feels amazing to be on a winning streak, to constantly figure out solutions with no hesitation, and then you get to that stupid part in Uncharted 3. What the hell do I do here? That's when I usually call it quits and just look up a guide, when the rest of the game is like this, and then I'm stuck trying to figure out this part for like 3 hours. Like, oh wow, I can't figure out this puzzle in Resident Evil 2. I want to piss my pants, not think critically. If I can't get the solution quick enough, I have to lay out my options. Do I swallow my pride and Google the answer, or do I swallow my pride and play video games? Even just Googling the solution to a puzzle can be tricky. Sometimes it's hard to put your situation into words, but most of the time, what I'm looking for immediately comes up. Yeah, that one thing in Link's Awakening. Oh, there it is. That shows me that tons of other people run into the exact same problem I do in games, and brings up the question, is the player admitting defeat by looking up a walkthrough, or did the developer fail to make that certain area more understandable? I played Hellblade, and within the first hour there was this. What? You have to line up these things to form diagrams by standing in certain places, but that requires finding certain places to stand in and trudging around the environment to find these certain places. It's hard to explain, let alone do. I gave up trying to figure it out on my own, and lots of other people did too, apparently. So fuck it, time to whip out the strategy guides.
This will help with my Hellboy playthrough.
Online walkthroughs are one thing. Most of these are fans helping other fans get through a game. Strategy guides are video game companies monetizing the fact that their games were designed poorly. As nice as guidebooks can be, the more I think about it, I do have to ask, why some of the stuff wasn't included in the game itself. Why do I have to buy a book to know what the hell to do here? I mean, it wouldn't be considered a puzzle if everybody would be able to figure out the solution immediately. I guess at that point I might as well ask, what's the point of buying a thesaurus when the dictionary should just straight up tell me what another word for upset is? For some people, they don't need it. They can find another word for upset by reading the dictionary some more and finding one on their own. But for people who just need answers, and they need them now, crack out the thesaurus. The strategy guide is the thesaurus of video games.
I have said that so many times today.
Strategy guides primarily began life as video games became more complex in the 80s, when games actively required explanation or strategy to complete. One of the only things you needed to ask when playing most Atari games is, how much longer can I keep this up? High score-based games definitely had strategies to them, but players rarely got stuck in them. When games started offering worlds to explore and get stuck in, you bet they set up hotlines to call. The Nintendo Power Line was a quick and dirty solution for players who got stuck in games. Call this number and you'd be directed towards an expert. They'd have binders full of walkthroughs to reference and be playing games right then and there to more easily assess the problem you were having. This seemed like the best way to get past tricky points in a game. Just call the hotline. The only problem is, it was a hotline. Yeah, sure, if you want to spend more money on the phone than you did on the game, go for it. I've called hotlines for much less.
Thank you for calling Nintendo. For assistance in English, press 1.
What's up?
The Nintendo Power Line was kind of an immediate solution to problems players had, but it did well enough to be operational until June 2010. I am shocked. However, if you needed help with games, most just primarily checked out the latest tips and tricks in magazines. Nintendo Power offered loads of maps and hints for games in the 80s and 90s, and that's what the original issues were primarily all about. Sometimes they just throw out little tips here and there, and other times they pretty much explain the whole game. This is the entirety of Dr. Wily's Revenge. Secret codes, direct answers to popular gaming questions, hell, sometimes they told you how to fix your game systems. Nintendo Power and other magazines were how many players overcame all kinds of obstacles back then. Some of the problems with getting help by magazines, though, was that these things only came once a month, and it wasn't a guarantee the game you were having problems with was going to be featured. But when your game was featured, it was great. They wouldn't always spoil the game and would just supplement the gaming experience by giving players tools to create their own strategy to beat the game themselves. That's a great fucking idea, strategy guides! Why not just specifically release guides dedicated to specific games? That way, if you need help, you know exactly what to harass your mom to buy. Now, there was a Super Mario Bros. 3 player's guide strategy guides covering loads of NES games alongside certain guidebooks you could get bi-monthly in the mail through Nintendo Power. However, one of the first specific ones I think many remember is Mario Mania, which is not only a full Super Mario World guide, but doubles as a retrospective of Mario up until that point. We have a timeline of the games, character profiles, artwork, Mario and other media. It's an interesting read, especially comparing how these things were described as back then to nowadays. But looking at the strategy guide portion, it goes into insane detail for a game like Mario World. It may be because many of the moves you can pull off in this game are second nature to me now, but they go crazy in depth with pretty much every single thing here from the start of the game all the way to the end. There's nearly an entire page dedicated to what you can do with shells. Every area has a comprehensive guide alongside big fat pieces of artwork you don't see an awful ton today. Full spreads of levels. This is an incredibly comprehensive guide of not only Mario World, but all things Mario at the time. Now, I may have said Mario Mania is one of the first guides many would remember, but that doesn't mean they didn't exist before Nintendo hit it big. Oh no, no, no. I may have said Atari didn't require guides as much as NES era games did. Doesn't mean they didn't get them. Gaming books from the 80s. These were probably the most comprehensive gaming material you could get at the time. This one focuses on some of the more popular Atari 2600 games, featuring a catalog of them and a brief history of Atari at the beginning. They couldn't capture screenshots from the game, so instead they would recreate them and focus on explaining the best strategies for obtaining a high score. I mean, I go about my day asking this all the time. What would Video Frank say? These publications were all about telling you how to become a video game master, to know anything and everything about gaming to impress somebody. Yes, I'd like the definition of sex in the 80s, please. These paperback books dedicated to the ultimate tips on how to win at all things video games remind me of the 4 Dummies books. These were marketed to people who just wanted to win something for once in their lives. But for anybody playing games at the time, they made sure to pack these books up with enough content to make them enjoyable to a wide array of fans. There's even a preview section at the end talking about how things are looking bright for Atari in 1983. Yes, the video game crash of 1983 due to the video game market being oversaturated with shit. Listen, the market crashed around that time due to a variety of reasons, but the game everybody points to that supposedly caused it was E.T. the video game. It was hyped up, they expected it to be a wild success, and when people played it, they didn't understand what was going on and mass returned them. That spread the claim that E.T. was the worst video game of all time because people didn't understand it. They returned the game to the stores. One thing led to another. Atari said, we're f***ed, video game market crashed. But this game wasn't the sole reason, and compared to most other Atari games, is it really that much more confusing than Adventure? This game's considered one of the best Atari 2600 games ever made. Like, is this that much worse than that? I'm not saying E.T. was great or anything, but I feel like it's misunderstood. It really just required more of a knowledge of what exactly to do in the game. And would you look at that, an unofficial strategy guide that tells you exactly what you have to do in the game. This is one of the earliest dedicated strategy guides I could find, and of all Atari games, E.T. needed it the most. Most games on the console were based around getting a high score, while E.T. had more of a specific goal in mind. You effectively wanted to beat the game, finish the quest. It's just not apparent what the hell that quest is. So a cheap little strategy guide, yeah, that made a whole lot of sense. They actually give pretty decent screenshots and a cube you could put together of the different screens. And the idea of more complex games needing more complex forms of explanation and strategy held true as the next couple of generations came forward. It was no longer not only about getting the high score, rather finishing the game, but these two forms, the dedicated one game guide and book of secrets, were some of the easiest methods of obtaining this kind of information for a bit. How to Win at Nintendo Games was one of the most popular books for NES players, but it's nothing special nowadays. Just a simple book full of strategies and tips. It's simply all about mastering the games that can't be beat. This book has a chapter about Mickey Mousecapade. This was a pretty popular series of books, as in I have 2 of them. But the video game magazines were still how most got their information on this type of stuff, and some magazine publications decided to combine the tip books with magazines, and we have the dedicated magazine-esque book of guides. We had a lot of unofficial ones, but Nintendo Power made quite a few, like Top Secret Passwords. Primarily a guide comprising of cheat codes, or a couple ones dedicated to the Game Boy, including one for the Super Game Boy, the adapter for the Super Nintendo. It's pretty much just a standard guide for the more popular Game Boy titles in the context of playing them on a Super Nintendo. The Nintendo Player's Guides are my favorite to go through. They almost always had extra sections in the book dedicated to just talking about the games at the time. Also, the formatting of the pages is just really nice. Big and bold screenshots and some of the most well-written video game blurbs of the time. It's a little weird to enjoy going through these guides for games I already know how to play, but this is the kind of stuff I'd do as a kid. I'd read the same magazines over and over again on car rides. Why did I need to skim through this issue of Nintendo Power for the 9th time? Because it's enjoyable consuming media about an industry you enjoy. I don't know why. If you come up and tell me Wii Play was bundled with a Wii remote, like, yeah, I know that, but I'm gonna eat it up anyways because I'm a sucker for video game information. Or I have short-term memory loss. Throughout the 90s, it became more commonplace for specific video games to get their own dedicated guides instead of simply compiling information from a bunch of games into one magazine or book. When you have a game as big as Super Mario 64 or Ocarina of Time, they definitely require their own walkthrough instead of squishing tips for them into one short paragraph. And this was the birth of a video game tradition, the release of the strategy guide alongside the game. Magazines started to shift over more to news and reviews, and the tips and tricks portions became its own product with the strategy guide. No problem, I'd love to spend a couple of bucks on a guidebook for my favorite games. What the f is that? Right around the time these things started to burst in popularity, that pesky little thing called the internet started to become more widely used for more than just... If you were having a problem with a game, you could just hop on a message board and ask how to get past a certain section. Just look up the solution on Google, find a walkthrough another fan made, all for free. You didn't even have to drive to the store to pick up a walkthrough, it was all instant. So this should have been the immediate death of all things this, but physical strategy guides kept living on to this very day. They were more of a tradition than a necessity, something that people definitely continue to use, no doubt, but the practicality of them has been dwindling by the day. In the late 90s, early 2000s, sure, you could look up this stuff online, but internet speeds were a big fan of the word abysmal, and there weren't as large of a database of video game walkthroughs as there is now. Plus, you couldn't always trust the internet when it's giving you helpful hints. IGN still tells me all you have to do to turn the stars into birds in Mega Man 2 is hold A, but no, you have to hold A and B. You're a company, you should know better! So strategy guides still had their place in gaming, but as the internet became more widespread and was the one-stop shop for gaming everything, they started to become so much less prevalent. Eventually, Nintendo and other companies stopped making them themselves and licensed their titles out to companies that specialize in strategy guides, most notably Prima Games. See, I personally feel like something was lost a bit when others started making guides for the big guys. See, here we have an official Nintendo walkthrough. I'd be concerned if they didn't know what I should do. When you have an outsider make the guide, things get a bit iffier. That's not to say we haven't gotten some top quality works from companies like Prima or Brady Games or Piggyback. I mean, they do officially license walkthroughs after all, but they can definitely be a bit lame sometimes. Like the Final Fantasy IX strategy guide, in which a good chunk of information you had to visit a website to obtain. Why the fuck? This was when guidebooks were trying to harness the popularity of the internet in hopes that online walkthroughs and physical strategy guides could exist simultaneously and be of benefit to each other. No. If anything, this just made you ask, why did I buy the book if it's asking me to go online anyways? Why wouldn't I just go online for everything? A lot of physical guides now give you a free e-guide, which you can access online, and like, yeah, nice sentiment, but the whole charm of seeing everything the official guide has to offer, honestly, a lot of it comes from the fact that it's physical. If I need help in a game and I grab my phone, it's way simpler for me to quickly Google my problem instead of pulling up the e-guide. Now, some walkthroughs are really nice. They give you great and clear screenshots that tell you exactly what to do, and then you have the exact opposite of that. Here I have this Mario Kart Wii guide by Prima. The layout's okay, but I feel like they just don't show a lot and end up describing things with only words, and I don't get why. Before you engage foes in competition, park your car here. Where? But I do like when they take advantage of the fact this is a physical book on paper, having a little checklist and just pure visualization of what you're supposed to do, written and edited by professionals with the game developer's blessing, usually means knowledge is on for dinner tonight. One thing I really love about traditional strategy guides is the art. And not only the key art from the games, but the stuff made specifically for the guides, the diagrams of the levels. Mario Galaxy's guide has full 3D renders of the worlds, and it's really cool. These were definitely made by some unpaid intern I died to have lunch with, but just getting a full-blown view of these levels is really nice. So much work gets put into these things, but sadly, I feel like this work seldom gets appreciated or even viewed, especially in recent years. The primary audience for strategy guides are the fans of these games, and thus, they don't actually need to crack these open. They just want the guides because they love these games so much, they'll buy it out of respect. I didn't need a Smash Bros. For Wii U and 3DS guide, but I wanted it because I loved those games. I skimmed it. I enjoy having all this info compiled into one amazing waste of paper, but how many people actually bought this guide to help them play the game? All the information related to how much damage certain attacks do, my god, this game had numerous updates. Characters and stages were added, the balance of attacks were tweaked, none of this is still true. This book was outdated within 4 months of its release. Which is why the internet is the true best way to get help with games now. It blows, but it has to be this way. I mean, I've stopped playing my fair share of games for a while, and a couple weeks later when I come back, what the hell happened when I was gone? I end up going to Google to see exactly what I'm supposed to do. You will find me bored and directionless if I go to GameStop praying they made a Kirby Star Allies guide. I feel less dirty looking at an official guide for pointers. Asking the internet for help, now that's too easy. See, I could play through an entire game no problem, no help required, but I'm more of a recreational virgin. I don't want to waste all this time trying to figure out some things on my own. I just want to get on with the game. And sometimes the walkthroughs you have to read aren't descriptive enough. That's when you need to look up the videos. I love game walkthrough videos. I know exactly what I want to hear. What's up, guys? It's me, Game Fan Mike here, and today I'm going to show you how to get through the entirety of the first level in Super Mario Brothers. It's really easy, it's really simple, and I'm going to show you real quick. This is a classic game, one of my all-time favorites, and I'm going to show you how to get from point A to point B. Before we get started, I'd really appreciate it if you gave me a like, a thumbs up, a nod, really. Any form of respect you can give, I'll take it. You are what's helping me grow and make helping you all out with games my full-blown career. Alright, ran out of time there. We'll start over on the next life. Just a reminder, guys, before we get to the meat of this, if you haven't yet, please follow me on Twitter. Each form of video game walkthroughs have some merit to them. It just so happens the internet-based ones have that much more merit. They're just so much easier to access, and most of the time you only need help with like 1 or 2 little things with the game, so buying a 400-page walkthrough for a game doesn't make much sense anymore. You can get all of this information online, and most of the people buying these things nowadays are collectors. And they're not buying these books because they need the walkthroughs. It's their favorite games. They know how to play them. They're buying these just because they're books based on their favorite games. So all of the information in this book is pretty much work completely wasted. And with Prima Games officially putting an end to their physical strategy guide business, I feel like others have the same sentiment as well. It just makes more sense to put time and effort into art books or retrospective works instead of physical strategy guides. But when these things finally bite the dust entirely, I won't ever forget them. I don't think I'll go the rest of my life without remembering. Oh shit, remember strategy guides? Hey y'all, Scott here. Bullshit. I don't need video game controllers. I have all the controllers I need right here. Yeah.
I failed anatomy.
You guys want to see what a Nintendo fan committing adultery looks like? Yeah, look it, I lived it. The 7th generation of video game consoles, where the Xbox 360 reigns supreme if you don't count all other consoles. 3rd place after being in 1st since it came out before the other two, 2nd after the Wii became a jock, and 3rd after the PlayStation 3 gained a lot more momentum in its later years. I mean, come on, it had all these games come out right before the PlayStation 4 took over. The Xbox 360 before the Xbox One, like, oh wow, Gears of War Judgment came out.
It did?
Well, the Xbox 360 ended up being the lowest selling of the three. For a while there, it was head of the class. I mean, the PlayStation 3 was kind of just bleeding the first couple years on the market. The 360 had a handful of must-have titles and was nearly half the price of a PS3. And on top of that, this era was when online multiplayer was really starting to become a thing, so people were not only buying 360s because they were cheaper and for Gears of War and Halo 3, they were buying them so they could play online with their friends who also had 360s. However, while these two consoles were duking it out, another one in the distance was taking advantage of uncles everywhere. The Wii was cool, right? You could swing the Wii remote and the game would respond accordingly sometimes. The Wii was the best-selling console that generation, asterisk. Sure, it sold over 100 million consoles, but did it though? A lot of those were sold to your uncle who played it for a couple of weeks and never played it again. Sure, you sold the console, but is rotting in the entertainment center really a life worth living? Regardless, it cornered the casual market. People who didn't normally play video games were attracted to the Wii due to its simplicity, motion controls, and not Wii music. Like, look at this, I can't hold this, it has prongs. What are these? Why are there two of them? The Wii remote was no nonsense, easy to understand. You hold it like a TV remote and you can just shake it around for most games. You didn't have to think about what to do to make the little man on screen swing the tennis racket, you just swung the remote like a tennis racket. As good as standard controllers are, there's a reason mom can't look them straight in the eye. The motion control, simplicity, and fun factor of Wii Sports really helped the Wii fly off the shelves like crazy. Not only was the technology up to par with the standards of neat at the time, but it was fun and easy to grasp for most people. So that's just the thing, the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 were catering to people who wanted to play hardcore AAA games, but it was hard to overlook just how successful the Wii was doing catering to everybody else. The motion control gimmick worked for Nintendo. It got non-gamers to become real gamers, but you want to know what really kept the Wii remote away from greatness? The Wii remote. Fucking ew, I don't want to hold something and swing my arms around, I just want to swing my arms around. That's where Microsoft got us. Introducing Kinect for Xbox 360. See, this was a fun look into the future of humanity. It was so technologically advanced, and just like the future of humanity, I can see death in this. The Kinect was Microsoft's answer to not only trying to definitively beat the PlayStation 3, but also take on Nintendo as well. The Wii was in a league of its own. It was fair to say these two things weren't directly competing, but Microsoft wanted a piece of that pie. So instead of a motion controller, why not a camera that tracks your motions? That led to an admittedly pretty smart marketing angle. When I grow up, I want to be the controller. I mean, they were kicking Nintendo down with this whole "you are the controller, no controller required" shtick. It only made consumers think that using controllers for motion control was a nuisance and that no controller required was the way of the future. They were solving a problem that not a ton of people really had with the Wii. Sure, back in the day, the thought of the Wii remote swap and spit with your TV was terrifying, but did anybody really go, yes, motion controls, no, I have to hold that? Kinect was a smart move by Microsoft. It made a lot of Wii owners look over with envy. They were all like, oh wow, you don't need a controller now? It's like having enough of pencil bullshit, so you just use speech-to-text apps on your computer. It works 40% of the time, but hey, it's way more technologically advanced than pencil bullshit. However, to truly understand what the hell, we must go all the way back to when the hell. Project Natal. Sure. This was revealed at E3 2009, a camera accessory for the Xbox 360 that tracked your whole body and could do some pretty interesting stuff. You could look at the bottom of an Xbox avatar's shoe.
Well, bam! There it is.
That was the first use of Kinect they demoed. And Steven Spielberg supports it? They got Steven Spielberg? Oh, yes, of course I'll buy your stupid shitty video game camera. Yeah, Steven Spielberg, ever heard of him? Director, writer, Kinect advocator. To be fair, Spielberg made some good points in his appearance here. He mentioned how games are intimidating to a lot of people. You can't just expect anybody to pick up a controller and start playing a game in the same way somebody can just sit down and watch a movie. Project Natal would just require people to move their bodies in front of the screen to control a game in very intuitive ways. There'd be nothing to learn, no hurdles to overcome, no nunchuck to plug in. It can do anything. It can splash paint, hit balls, have meaningful conversations with artificial intelligence with Project Milo. I mean, yeah, that's impressive and also bullshit. Yeah, this was all about having an actual conversation with artificial intelligence, and the way they showed it off just screamed fake, or at least within an extremely controlled environment to me. It's 2019, they still haven't nailed sex bots, and I'm expected to believe this from 2009? Regardless, Project Natal showed a lot of promise. It was like the Eye Toy for the PlayStation 2, but with a ton more tech crammed into it. The Eye Toy was pretty much just a
webcam. Natal had 3 sensors on the front, it projected infrared lights onto the user to track them, it could sense depth, gestures, it had facial recognition, voice recognition. This thing was jam-packed with features and technology. Project Natal had potential, and it was all building up to its official unveiling 1 year later at E3 2010. Project Natal was officially named Kinect for Xbox 360. I like the name. I will stand by the opinion that Microsoft has a terrible history of naming products, and Kinect was one of their best ones. But this was it. This was where Microsoft was going to show off the future of gaming, what their new accessory was seriously capable of, what set it apart from the Wii. I am a big supporter of not this. E3 2010 was where a lot of people grew a strong distaste towards the Kinect. Only the first 30 minutes of their hour-and-a-half long show were dedicated to games people actually cared about, and then the last hour was ugh, eek, and gross. The Kinect ended up releasing later that year on November 4th, 2010 for $150 here in North America. You could use it on the original model of the 360, but you needed a separate power adapter for it. The second and third iterations of the console were more Kinect friendly. All you had to do was plug the Kinect in and you were good to go. I personally got a Kinect alongside a 360 for Christmas in 2011. You see, if you were an 8th grader and only had a Wii, you were a fucking pussy. That's why I wanted either an Xbox 360 or PlayStation 3, because I wasn't a fucking pussy, I swear. I ended up choosing a 360 because I played around with the Kinect at a friend's house a couple months prior, and that completely sold me on it. So I got a 4GB Xbox 360 and Kinect bundle that came with Kinect Adventures. I also got GoldenEye 007 Reloaded, Dance Central, and U-Star 2, because nothing screams I'm not a fucking pussy like U-Star 2. Yeah, I know the Kinect has a crazy bad rep. A lot of people have negative opinions of this thing because of how much Microsoft prioritized it during the latter half of the Xbox 360's life. It felt like they were pushing the hardcore audience off to the side while focusing too much on Kinect and the casual market, all while those same casual consumers who bought a Wii and later a Kinect, yeah, they weren't long-term fans. They bought a Kinect, had their fun with it, and then moved on. Now, I didn't have a one-night stand with this thing. I played it, but I don't have a lot of massive memories of it all. The Kinect I never thought too highly of. I always felt like the concept had a lot of potential, though. I still feel like the concept has a lot of potential. I feel like too many people are unwilling to accept new and innovative ways of controlling video games. Too many people just assume that, yep, this is it. This is how all video games should be controlled till the end of time. I mean, yeah, that's the definitive way to play most modern games, but being unwilling to change the input method for a lot of games means we won't get as many innovative experiences. Video games can be so much more than what the standard controller allows for, and if we don't accept stuff like this, then we won't get crazy experiences that we couldn't get with standard controllers. It's too bad this wasn't that good. So turning on the 360 with the Kinect plugged in, it has to boot up by nodding its head up and down. Yes, there is a god and they let this happen. It needs a sec to figure out the optimal viewing angle for your Kinect experience, and entering the menus, there I am. So I have to wave at the NSA to get Kinect to recognize me, and now I can move my hand around to pummel through some menus. Now, if the Kinect doesn't see you, well, it's time to tune the Kinect. Each Kinect comes with sleep paralysis. We use this card to calibrate the camera, and don't ask me, I don't know how. And there we are, from the chest up, I exist. We can use voice commands. All we have to do is say, Xbox. It starts listening, and we can do such things as ask it to search using Bing. It's really hard to use the Kinect after throwing it in the garbage, so we'll put it back for now. I mean, this works for the most part, but it's so slow. Tracking your hand, there's a bit of a delay, so everything feels like it's almost in slow motion, and you have to hold your hand over an option for a few seconds to select something. However, back when the Kinect originally came out, this was an effective way to make any casual gamer lose their mind. Like, yeah, it's a power trip controlling a menu like this, but every time I do this, I just end up going through withdrawal. So most Kinects came bundled with all reliable Kinect Adventures. So this was Microsoft obviously trying to pull a Nintendo, though we experienced tremendous success, and a lot of that was definitely because Wii Sports was bundled in. That game did an amazing job of showcasing how easy and fun it can be to use the Wii Remote. The sports were fast-paced and a joy to play through. Does Kinect Adventures reach that level of quality and fun? This guy's selling like 20 for $5. Kinect Adventures is fine enough. As a freebie with the Kinect, it does the job, but it doesn't try to be anything more than that. The theme of Kinect Adventures is camping and space. 4 camp-themed minigames, 1 space-themed one. Let's start off with 20,000 leaks. You move your hand and feet around to plug up holes. I fucking dare you to imagine that without Kinect. River Rush, you move around to control a raft and jump up and down to go faster. Yes, I've lost all ambition. Rally Ball, you hit the balls to break stuff. It's okay. Reflex Ridge, squat a bunch to get through the obstacle course. This one's also okay. And finally, we have Space Pop. That's Kinect Adventures. I felt like it met the quota for what a free minigame collection should be. It does the job, but it also doesn't at the same time. This is an incredibly boring representation of what the Kinect can do. So many of the minigames just feel like nothing here for people to get excited about. I still had an okay amount of fun playing this game, but not enough to warrant buying a Kinect or playing this ever again.
Well, Microsoft knew Kinect Adventures alone wasn't gonna cut it.
No.
Alongside the launch of the Kinect, they put out a handful of other games under the Kinect moniker. We got Kinect Sports, Kinect Joyride, and Connectimals. Kinect Sports was actually developed by Rare. You know Rare. Used to work a lot with Nintendo Rare, got bought by Microsoft Rare, barely did anything noteworthy afterwards, and was forced to work on Kinect games Rare. That Rare, you know that Rare? Kinect Sports is a direct response to Wii Sports, and a pretty okay one, all things considered. This should have been the pack-in title instead of Kinect Adventures. That game was just... Kinect Sports is way more involved. It uses the Kinect in way more impressive ways due to just how active you have to be. But here's my problem with this type of game on the Kinect compared to on the Wii. Games like boxing and track and field feel really natural with Kinect. But then you have bowling and table tennis where you just have to act like you're holding objects. And it just doesn't feel right. Being the controller doesn't equate to it feeling natural to swing my arms around with nothing in them to play ping pong. With the Wii, I have a tangible controller in my hands. It feels much more natural when playing a game where you're holding a tangible item. Man, I've got tangibility on the mind tonight. And while we're on the topic, let's give Kinect Joyride a try. See, what you have to do here is pretend that you're holding a wheel and then start to play a shitty game, and that's how Kinect Joyride works. It just doesn't feel right. I constantly over or undershoot each turn. The split second of delay between my actions and what happens in the game doesn't help things at all. This is in no way immersive or natural feeling. A Mario Kart Wii feels 10 times more natural because you're actually holding a wheel in your hands. Here, you're holding nothing, and it costs $150 to do so. Well, if a game called Kinect Joyride was a bust, what does that mean for Connectimals? Microsoft really pushed this game with Kinect. I assume they thought this was going to be the next Nintendogs.
I would love to see that timeline.
I mean, this is the best looking game we've seen so far. We get to pick a Connectimal and then teach it some tricks and play with some toys. They kind of move you through a small story and give you a bit of a mini game to play. I mean, it's fine, but it's not compelling, and you know when I pulled this game off the shelf, that's what I was looking for. It feels like a Kinect minigame collection disguised as a pet simulator. It doesn't even feel like this Connectimal is mine, it just feels like I'm renting it. Anybody ever play the other two Sonic Rider games and go, what the fuck? These aren't easy to pick up and play. They're weirdly complicated, so surely the Kinect version of this series must be better. Sonic Free Riders is consistently labeled as one of the worst Sonic games, mainly due to the controls. And the menus, people hate the menus. Many just have not gotten Free Riders to work well. From what I've played, I got it to function enough. You have to stand like you're on a hoverboard, but you have to do a ton of extra motions to use items and grab rings and wipe the screen off, and turning is so difficult sometimes. And then the menus don't even have labels. You have to scroll through each and every option to see what they are, and scrolling is a mess.
Weird, right? This one wasn't good.
Well, I saved the best for last. Dance Central. There isn't anything that special about this game. It's a dancing game. You dance along to the song, moves you have to perform come up, and you just have to dance as well as you can to get the best score possible. Again, nothing that special, but this is a game that Kinect truly does best. Dancing games on the Wii were a bit gimped. Games like Just Dance could only read what the hand the Wii Remote was in was doing, and even then the Wii Remote wasn't advanced enough to truly know if you were doing the dance move correctly. Kinect was, and still is in my opinion, the definitive platform for games like Just Dance and Dance Central.
That's nice. Well, let's move on from Kinect launch titles to
Kinect Star Wars was supposed to be one of the Kinect's killer apps, I guess. They originally showed off a brief clip of it at E3 2010, and it's 9 years later and I'm still underwhelmed. They showed off more of it at E3 2011, and based on this footage, you'd expect Kinect Star Wars to be just a full-blown game of just this. No, it's pretty much a minigame collection. This lightsaber adventure whatever mode is pretty short, and to make up for it, they included a pod racing game, a 20-second long game where you destroy a village, dancing, it wouldn't be a Star Wars without dancing. Playing through the main story mode, I would actually do stuff for 10 seconds and then get interrupted by cutscenes constantly. Every time they actually let me do something, they rip it away from me. Also, again, it's weird. I feel like the lightsaber fights would feel more natural on the Wii. There, you're holding something in your hands. Here, you're just whipping your arms around. Now, I said one of the games I got with my 360 was U-Star 2. Now, as you can see, I still own U-Star 2, which implies I can't be a fucking see, I own U-Star 2. This is one of the most underrated games for the Kinect. I actively wanted a Kinect for this game because the concept was so cool. You have a bunch of scenes from movies and it's fundamentally karaoke. You have to stand in front of the camera and reenact the scenes. Now, of course, you can do whatever you want on the camera, that's up to you, but I always thought this game was pretty neat and I stand by it to this day. And if we're talking Kinect games I actually liked, There's like 3. One of them is definitely Happy Action Theater. There was no point to this game at all. It's more of a toy that just puts you in different environments and situations. You can interact with objects, take fun pictures. It's a cute little diversion. It was a downloadable only game developed by Double Fine, who made a sequel, Connect Party, and another Connect game, Sesame Street Once Upon a Monster. Damn it, this is better than Connect Star Wars. For what this game is, it's actually pretty good. For a young child, just being able to wave your arms around and for the game to actually read your movements and play really simple minigames, this works incredibly well, and I can tell this is actually a really good game for kids. That leads us to Connect Disneyland Adventures, a game also directed at children. Look at this presentation from E3 2011. Children don't lie, look at them, they're having fun. This is an open world recreation of Disneyland. Who the hell thought it was a good idea to make an open world Connect game? There are a few other Disney themed Connect titles, one of them being Connect Rush, focusing on Pixar movies. Honestly, a pretty high quality title. I said high quality, not good. You explore all these different worlds based on Pixar movies, but nothing really screams Connect about this one. It's almost like they took a regular game and just forced you to use Connect to control it. In fact, just a few years ago, they re-released Connect Rush and Disneyland as Xbox One games with no Connect support at all. That brings us to games that really shouldn't have required Connect, but did the deed anyways. Connect was home to a very few amount of core titles, one of them being Rise of Nightmares. I always assumed this was a part of the Condemned series of games, but like, I'm gonna look that up. It's a standard first-person horror game, but you have full control of your environment. You have to tilt your shoulders to turn and place one foot forward to move. You have to go into a fighting stance to start punching, and Jesus Christ, no thank you. This feels like they were working on a standard first-person horror game and then made it Connect only later on. It has an auto move option, but you have to constantly select it and it resets after every cutscene. Now, there could be an option to keep auto move on at all times, but I stopped playing this game already. Nothing was compelling. The controls weren't fun. I'm over it. Hopefully the other major M-rated Connect title will be better. Steel Battalion Heavy Armor. This was one of the few Connect titles to use the Connect sensor as well as the controller. Steel Battalion was a chunk on the original Xbox. It came with this giant accessory that replicated an actual mech. Now with the Connect, you don't need that giant piece of shit. You have this smaller piece of shit. All these controls are now on screen, and because of that, our view of what's going on outside is about 20% of the screen real estate. You still use the controller to do stuff like shoot, but you have to select all these doodads with your hand, and sometimes if I rest my elbows on my knees, since, you know, I'm holding a controller, the Connect stopped recognizing me, so I had to play like this. This is garbage.
That's the self-destruct. If we have to bail on the battlefield, we'll want to destroy the beacon before it falls into enemy hands.
Whoa, hey, so you go that far? It ain't funny no more, partner.
Jeez, Parker said, put your fucking hands down.
Most of the other Connect titles were alternate reality versions of Wii shovelware. We had Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, which required Connect for some ungodly reason, and for an even ungodlier reason, it doesn't control well. They couldn't get a trivia game to control well. Minute to Win It, Wipeout, sports minigame collections, Fruit Ninja Connect was originally what sold me on Connect. That was a fun little time. Microsoft supported it with a few other titles like Fable the Journey and the Gunstringer. There was a fair amount of support for the Connect. People just didn't really fall in love with the concept. It was cool at first, but the novelty died down incredibly quickly. Sure, it read your movements alright, but it took way longer to get through menus and play games and calibrate the thing compared to most of the casual stuff on the Wii. I never hated the Connect. I felt like I went along with the mob a little too much sometimes whenever I would say, yeah, the Connect, who likes that thing? I had some fun with it. I didn't have enough fun to keep playing it. I'm not that sad that Connect games stopped getting made, but we are missing out on those sweet E3 press conference moments. But I do think there were a handful, albeit very few, good experiences with Connect, including the fact that developers use it in legitimately much more interesting and good ways in real-world situations. But the games... yeah, a lot of them didn't feel like the developers had a great understanding of how to utilize the Connect well. It would be too slow to finally get into a game. 90% of them were just kind of knockoffs of Wii stuff. But thank God Project Milo never came out. With AI that crazy, the world isn't ready to be overrun by sex bots. Hey y'all, Scott here. You ever stare in front of the mirror and practice what you're about to say to somebody? Hey, you know what they say, go f yourself. Well, I'm practicing what to say at a family reunion that's coming up. They'd probably say, oh Scott, it's been so long, talk to me. And I'd go, Dimensions, oh my favorite. You know, 2D just kind of happened. Nobody went, flat plane, no Z-axis. People have always been after that, their third dimension. It's the future and the solution to all your problems in marriage. These never work. The dimension of our dreams, and when we finally got it,
I miss garbage. I mean, we could go back before 2D gaming to no D. These were the days. Who are we kidding? It's always been a battle between 2D and 3D. You could argue 4D gaming is something like virtual reality, but I will categorize 4D like movies and theme park rides do. If my chair moves, that's the fourth dimension. Maybe someday we'll get a true fourth dimension in gaming, but for now we gotta settle for Frogger 3D being the farthest we can go. These days, it's 2D and 3D living in harmony. But it wasn't always like this, at least on home consoles. It seemed like for a second there that 2D was merely a product of hardware limitations. The only reason to make a 2D game is if you're making it for Game Boy or something. If you were making a game for the PlayStation 2, GameCube, or Xbox, you knew what dimension to make it. 3D was kind of seen as the new norm for modern console games, but now that status has been changed by Kirby Star Allies. 2D games are everywhere, sitting right alongside 3D ones, but how did it get this way? Well, like I said, 2D games just kind of happened. Do you really think there was a board meeting? Graphics. This was just what video games were at the time. This was the extent of what could be done, but 3D was still the dream of many. What if these characters weren't flat? They could walk around in a world, not just some kind of stage play. For 2D games, the top-down perspective was usually the answer to prayers like that, but everything was still so flat, and there were only so many things you could do and places you could go. At the time, though, this was perfectly fine. But then gunshots were heard. Super Mario 64 defined 3D gaming. It existed beforehand, but did it? Most 3D games had a hearty dose of quotation marks involved. They definitely were more 3D than not, but too many 2D elements were involved to truly make them feel like there's no going back from this. Sonic 3D Blast. Yeah, okay. Wolfenstein 3D and Doom laid the foundation for the modern first-person shooter utilizing 3D environments, and while consoles dabbled in 3D games prior, the PlayStation and Sega Saturn helped popularize them as a standard, even if these consoles did 2D games a bit better. A system like the Sega Saturn wasn't designed around 3D gaming. It was supposed to be a 2D sprite powerhouse with 3D effects for the backgrounds and such. But they saw the writing on the Christ! If your console wasn't capable of playing 3D games, well, Thanksgiving's gonna be awkward. This was where the industry was heading, but even though all these 3D games were releasing, they weren't fully taking advantage of this new dimension. They almost felt like 2D games at their core, just with 3D models instead of sprites. Oh, some games just used 3D models but stuck to a 2D perspective. But in came Mario 64, showing just how game design had to evolve. It wasn't the first 3D game, but it might as well have been. It was a monumental moment for gaming. I should know, I wasn't there, but have you noticed around this time, 2D became somewhat of a product of limitations? It almost felt like 3D replaced 2D, and 2D became relegated to handhelds because that's all they could do. Most flagship gaming franchises during this time felt the need to transition to 3D, and 2D was seen as old news. The only person that would care about them would be Lincoln, and he's dead! Of course, I'm mainly referring to game series that used to be 2D adventures, which evolved when 3D was becoming widely utilized. Something like Dr. Mario 64, it makes sense as to why it's just a simple 2D puzzle game, but out of all the action-adventure titles released on the Nintendo 64, I can only think of a handful of games played from a 2D perspective. Yoshi's Story, Mischief Makers, Kirby 64, you have Super Smash Bros. And other fighting games, but that's pretty much it. If you wanted 2D Mario, Zelda, or Donkey Kong, you had to play those on Game Boy. It really felt like Nintendo was pushing most games to just be 3D on the 64, which does make me wonder why they kept Yoshi and Kirby 2D during this time. Well, they still used 3D graphics, but kept the playing field 2D. You can only go left, right, up, or down, which created the term 2.5D. What's half a Z? It's a 2D game with 3D graphics, or a 3D game played from a 2D perspective. Dead. Pay attention. The PlayStation and Sega Saturn kept 2D games on consoles alive during this era, and this is where we got some of the most gorgeous sprite art ever conceived. It was brilliantly mixed with visual effects and backgrounds that only these new systems could achieve, and showed that 2D gaming wasn't just a step towards 3D. They were two different beasts deserving the same amount of attention. We're This is the era I'm talking about when I refer to the fall of 2D gaming. The PlayStation 2, Xbox, GameCube, and Dreamcast. If you were making a game for these platforms, it was almost certainly 3D, and if you wanted to make a 2D game, get in the car. 2D games were seen as for handhelds only, and by proxy, less important than the big 3D console games. Case in point, all of these franchises that originated in 2D all got games during this generation. Not a single console entry was 2D. Now, of course, what's the big deal? The 2D games didn't go away, you got those games on the handheld. It's like this label, what's there to question? What is this, moonshine or porn? Your 2D games never left, you just had to play them on the handheld. but because of that, they didn't feel like they were considered as important as what was on the consoles. Console games have always been the priority. Sure, you got 2 Zelda games on the Nintendo DS in between console entries, but literally every time people talk about the history of Zelda games, they always say, Twilight Princess came out, then Skyward Sword. It's almost like handheld games were treated as spin-offs sometimes, even if they had just as much, if not more integrity as whatever released on consoles. But in the end, they just weren't considered as important as console games. These handheld titles sold more than their console counterparts, but you'll barely hear people talk about the portable games. It's all about the home console ones. It's something that's always perplexed me. I always see Nintendo, Sega, Capcom, Sony pull from their classic home console games for nostalgia bait, but barely ever do so with their handheld titles by comparison. Well, I guess it's because normally console games get the bigger budgets, the bigger teams, and the bigger scopes because they can handle experiences of that size, and thus they're the bigger deals. Portable systems couldn't do as much, so budgets for games were generally smaller, and thus people generally saw games that released on handhelds as lesser and not as important than the console games. Grand Theft Auto Advance released the same day as San Andreas. Guess what happened? Most of the time, handheld variants of these series would be put in sub-series, with the console entries being direct sequels to one another. Basically, the most a lot of these handhelds could get would be prequels, side stories, etc. Systems like the Game Boy Advance could do some very light 3D stuff, but 2D was where it was most comfortable, so this was how 2D lived on at the time. Though with everything I said earlier about handhelds were home to the lesser experiences, it made 2D gaming feel unimportant. If any generation made this style feel like just a simple stepping stone to 3D, it was this one. I mean, previously you got games like Castlevania Symphony of the Night on PlayStation, but if you wanted games like that in the following generation, you had to play it on the Game Boy Advance because the type of Castlevania game you got on consoles during that era was this. 2D games were relegated to the Game Boy Advance because that's all it could realistically do, and with these games being cheaper, smaller titles on weaker hardware, 2D was seen as inherently worth less than 3D. Now, that doesn't mean 2D was completely off the GameCube, PS2, and Xbox. The Legend of Zelda 4 Swords Adventures on GameCube had a graphical style incredibly reminiscent of A Link to the Past on SNES, though now with all kinds of effects and crumbs on the screen. Looking at reviews, critics liked a lot about it outside of the graphics. A series that consistently were 2D only skipped main entries on consoles during this time. Classic Mega Man, Kirby, Yoshi, and when they wanted to do something like a new Mega Man X game, X7 was this new experiment bringing the series into 3D, with the next entry showing us just how well that turned out. X8 brought things back to a 2D perspective, releasing around 2005, which is where the rise of 2D started to occur. Xbox Live Arcade initially started out on the original Xbox, hosting games along the likes of arcade classics and some original, very simple games. You could download these games for a relatively small price, but when it made its way over to the Xbox 360, it blew up. Xbox Live Arcade became a breeding ground for smaller, bite-sized games, not just classic arcade titles. It helped create a market for simple, cheap experiences on a home console. Much like how the pick-up-and-play games worked well on handhelds, they worked just as well as downloadable games on the TV, as you could just hop into them, play them for a bit, and hop out without swapping discs. This was a godsend for retro stuff, making the classics easily accessible to the masses. Instantly downloadable, the games were smaller in file size and simply due to their age, which made them perfect to just always have at a moment's notice on our 360s. And I think this got people to realize, wow, this isn't dog shit. 2D retro-styled games still had a place on the home consoles. There's merit to these games existing right alongside the big bombastic 3D ones. So original downloadable games were starting to get pumped out for the marketplace, some of which were retro reboots of classics, others completely new concepts. All for affordable prices. If you haven't played Peggle because of budget constraints, that's your fault.
The bank is repossessing my body.
And I think the boom of downloadable smaller games showed how much value these titles still had. A game like Bionic Commando Rearmed was far more popular than the big, gritty Bionic Commando reboot it was fundamentally made to advertise. 2D games like this were finally making a comeback on consoles, though they were still being seen as worth less than 3D ones. The Xbox Live Arcade era really messed up my perception of price points, as back then they would charge like $10 for a new Space Invaders. Now it's like, I know it's in a collection, but still, It makes me look at something like Ghosts and Goblins Resurrection, that released in 2021 for $30 digitally, and I'm not saying it's not worth it. I'm saying the unbelievably cheap prices of digital games from this era makes me initially look at this as overpriced. 2D games were still seen as inferior in value to 3D titles. In fact, that just goes for various things in general during this era. Downloadable games were seen as lesser than retail games. Indie games were worse than AAA ones because they would always denote on storefronts that this was an indie game, this was an Xbox Live Arcade or PlayStation Network or WiiWare game. And thankfully, eventually, they just said, why are we giving these games labels? They're all just games at the end of the day. Who cares if it doesn't have a retail presence? Who cares if it was just made by one person? They should all be given the same label, not, oh, well, this is just a downloadable only game, or, oh, this is an indie game. How about, these are all Xbox 360 games? And I think that mindset helped 2D games in the long run, as they were primed for indie development. 2D is easier and cheaper to develop at its core and in general compared to 3D. Now, because of that, you may say, well then obviously that's why the perceived value of a 2D game was lower, because they're easier and cheaper to make. And for some reason, people keep pushing that old deal out. Because it's 2D, it should be cheaper. It's easier to make than a 3D game. Yeah, okay, look up the most expensive and difficult to make movies of all time. Chances are, they're the same price to watch as the Poltergeist of Borley Forest. I guess movies may be a weird comparison. I think a comparison people don't make enough are actual games. With 3D games, there's more that can go wrong. 2D is more grounded, there's only so many possibilities. 3D, there's more to take into account, adding to developmental issues. But from what I've seen, due to that, 3D games have so much more fluff, more cutscenes, boring tutorials, parts of the gameplay that are just you walking and following somebody and doing nothing else. Does it really matter? I have full control of what I do and where I go in this environment if there's nothing to do and nowhere to go? I'm just holding up here. A lot of these 3D games like to give you the illusion of being much more than what they really are. 2D, you can't do that as much because it's more obvious when you do it. You can't bullshit as much as you can with 3D games. And I know this sounds like I prefer 2D, and no, I like both of these equally, but as more and more time passes, it's easier and easier to call 3D games out on their garbage. Like the first time this little narrow hallway passage thing happened, I thought nothing of it, but the 60th game that did it this year? It's obvious this is here to not only mask loading screens, but also increase the time spent playing the game, even if it's only by a few seconds. Which making any game that lasts hundreds of hours, it's tough. But in a 3D world, you have more space to do more things. A 2D experience can only be consumed in so many ways, which I think adds to the perception that a 2D game is worth less than a 3D one. So regardless of 2D games coming back to consoles in a more substantial way, they were still seen as games that could only be $20 or less. However, I think the main company pushing forward, trying to give 2D games the same value as any other AAA release, is Nintendo. For a while there, Nintendo sort of pushed their 2D games off to their handhelds, which again, devalued them a bit. If you wanted 2D Zelda or Mario, you mostly had to get a Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, Nintendo DS, but even then, with Mario, from 1992 to 2006, there were no original 2D games produced. They just did remakes and re-releases on the portables, which it's crazy to think there was a time when 2D Mario was basically extinct. What Nintendo did instead was invest heavily into the Wario Land series. That was their premier 2D platformer for a bit, but in 2006, Nintendo revitalized 2D Mario with New Super Mario Bros. On DS. It was a sales juggernaut and helped prove that there was still a big audience for original 2D games. With the casual appeal of systems like the DS and Wii, it became more apparent than ever how many non-gamers understood 2D gaming far more than 3D. 3D, you have to worry about a camera system, and it's like, f you, I already have a mortgage to deal with. A game like the original Super Mario Bros., most players could deal with. Hell, many found it fun. Super Mario 64? Join the occult, Dad! While millions experienced and enjoyed video games, I think this era proved that 2D wasn't just an evolutionary step to take to get to 3D. It was something that was preferable in many ways to millions. It was simpler to understand for casual players, and as great as 3D was, it was too different from 2D to be considered a replacement. I think some people almost looked at going from 2D to 3D gaming as the transition from black and white to color and film. The 2D was mostly relegated to systems that just couldn't do 3D. But in reality, revitalizing 2D games was the ticket to grow gaming that much more. While the Nintendo DS could do 3D games, most of the major titles released on it were still 2D, even if they used 3D character models. And on the Wii, Nintendo started to pump more and more money into AAA 2D console games. This all started with Super Paper Mario in 2007, reimagining the Paper Mario RPG series as a 2D platformer with RPG elements and a gimmick showing you the 3D perspective of your 2D plane. Or maybe it didn't start it, but it showed where Nintendo was heading with many of its key franchises. Backwards! Nintendo has always been a very nostalgia-heavy company. Many times they theme their games around, remember that? But that doesn't mean there can't be any innovation with their nostalgia-heavy titles. Their next major 2D console game was Wario Land Shake It, also known as Wario Land The Shake Dimension in Europe. It's offensive over there. Wario Land didn't do much sales-wise, but it was a gorgeous 2D platformer on a console with great cutscenes, artwork, and animation. It was clear more time and money were being put into games like this. Even if the title didn't sell well, the intention was there. This was the first Wario Land on a console, and they went above and beyond to make it feel like it. We got Wario World on the GameCube, a 3D Wario platformer, but Wario Land Shake It was traditional 2D as all hell, which
was an important precedent to set, because 1 year later, Nintendo went all in on 2D console gaming with New Super Mario Bros. Wii. I remember my aunt wanted a Wii because, well, I loved Super Mario Bros. It clicked perfectly with the Wii's casual appeal. An old school Super Mario Bros. Game, a title like Mario Galaxy, you're gonna give Grandma a stroke with that. It didn't matter that it wasn't as visually appealing or epic and grandiose as the biggest games on the market at the time. New Super Mario Bros. Wii proved that people wanted simple 2D fun on their TVs just as much as on their handhelds. Plus, Nintendo introduced simultaneous multiplayer with this game, which became a staple in their modern 2D titles to come. Next year, we got Donkey Kong Country Returns and Kirby's Epic Yarn on Wii, Kirby's Return to Dreamland the next, and coupled with the Wii's downloadable library of old school NES and SNES games, retro-style new downloadable WiiWare titles, and the lower cost of developing games on it compared to Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, the Wii became the go-to console for the resurrection of 2D console gaming. Nintendo definitely noticed that these 2D titles appeal to far more consumers than ever before. You satisfy the casual crowd with simpler games they can understand. The hardcore community is pleased by the return to the classic era of gaming. Pop a multiplayer mode on there and all's forgiven. So because of this, Nintendo made another 2D game. And another 2D game. And another. 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 Nintendo leaned too far into 2D gaming after the success of New Super Mario Bros. Wii. It just felt like they took their 3D games and pushed them off to the side. And even when they did do 3D games, they took too much inspiration from the 2D ones. The Wii U and 3DS, frankly, had too much 2D. From 2012 to 2016, it almost felt like every other game Nintendo was making was a 2D platformer. And they're great, but my god! We went from not enough of them to too much just like that. And you know what? I get it. These 2D games were obviously a smart move because 1, they had wider appeal, and 2, they were definitely easier to develop. Like, why wouldn't you make the game that'll cost less to produce and make more money? But that's the problem. Many of these didn't feel like artistic decisions made because they wanted to make a 2D game. They felt like business decisions. Make a 2D game because it's more cost effective, and with a mindset like that, many of the 2D games that came out this generation, while crazy fun, weren't necessarily exciting in terms of what they represented. They felt like another Nintendo game, and that's it. Which, I think this was one of the factors that led to Nintendo's underperformance during this generation. The 2D games have wide appeal, but generally speaking, they don't leave the same impact as a 3D one. Nintendo's 2D output felt safe, not cutting edge, but when they would put out a 3D game, they'd knock it out of the park, which just kind of left a bad taste in my mouth concerning their output of 2D platformers. Because it's obvious they can be so much more, just look at what indies are doing. Some of the most ingenious concepts to ever grace gaming are coming from just a few people working on their own, and they're being put into 2D titles. And thankfully, the industry started to evolve. What used to be considered just indie games have become games. Some of the biggest modern successes in the industry come from them, and many of which are 2D games, ones that take inspiration from what studios did years ago, games that they just aren't as willing to put too much time, effort, and money into anymore. And these indie developers help to prove that some genres never die. Just because Castlevania and Metroid gave up for a while there doesn't mean there isn't a market for classic Castlevania and Metroid games like this anymore. The Xbox One's most iconic exclusive, in my opinion, was Cuphead. Donkey Kong Country came back with returns on Wii and Tropical Freeze on Wii U after the series was just in a dormant state of spin-offs and re-releases, and it came back to glowing reviews and great sales. These types of games always have a place in the market, and with handhelds and consoles becoming one, we've seen far more games that normally would have probably released on something like the Nintendo 3DS now appear on the Nintendo Switch alongside games like Breath of the Wild and Mario Odyssey. We see these games appear on PlayStation 4 or 5, Xbox Series X and S, and they don't feel out of place, which is awesome. Every game on the PlayStation Store has the same worth of each other. They're all games, and the entry level of printing a game on a disc obviously was lowered as we received so many more physical releases of smaller budget titles that normally would have been digital only. That led to more indie 2D games getting released this way. Even if it was in a limited fashion, a physical release still goes a long way in showcasing the value of said product. And with Nintendo showing there was a market for high quality 2D games on console, we've entered a bit of a 2D gaming revival renaissance within the past decade. Now, 2D Mario and Zelda can live side by side with their 3D counterparts on the same console. Games like a classic 2D Mega Man get bigger budgets and physical releases compared to the Xbox Live Arcade era where they were merely digital only. But one thing I always notice is how the value of these games always seem to be lower. Mega Man 11 was only $30, Sonic Mania was $20, yet these games are far better and gave me so much more to do than something like the Resident Evil 3 remake. So yeah, while 2D games are a bit more straightforward and shorter most of the time,
I'd rather be spending that entire 5-hour playtime actually playing the game rather than for half of it watching cutscenes that are available on YouTube, or even when I am playing the game, it's literally just holding the stick up as the character's walking and talking. That's not every 3D game, believe me. I love both of these styles equally, and for how often 3D games have filler, 2D games aren't exciting and too safe. You know, it kind of balances out. But the idea that a 2D game shouldn't be priced at $60, have you seen what you're buying? How is this, and this, and this, and this worth 60, hell, even 70? But Metroid Dread isn't worth 60. It's up to the consumer to decide how much they're willing to spend on a game. If a certain title isn't worth 60 to you, well, it isn't worth 60 to you, that's fine. But to denounce a game's price entirely based on it not having a Z-axis is a little ridiculous in my opinion. 2D gaming has gone from handheld only to dominating Nintendo's entire lineup to being in a great balance with 3D titles. I love I can see games from the same franchise on the same console, both released via physical media at the same price, but from two completely different dimensions. And then I'd say, what a family reunion! Where did everybody go?